Marvel. Skull and Bones by Swarthy. Chapter 26-50. 2012. Solensky Plaza, Russia. Shield jump jet. A few minutes later. Black Widow POV. Why did the enemy take Barton? I questioned Coulson over the phone. We don't know, but he's alive. We think so. We'll brief you on everything when you get back. But first, we need you to talk to the big guy. Coulson, you know that Stark trusts me about as far as he can throw me. Oh, I've got Stark. You get the big guy. I stopped in my tracks at his words, fear and anxiety rearing up as I thought about the big green giant. Coulson, are you sure about this? The guy isn't exactly the most stable person to be around. We don't have much of a choice. Something's coming and we need all hands on deck. Take the STRIKE team with you for backup. Letting out a tired sigh, I agree to the mission and close the phone. In Russian, my God, I mutter under my breath as I move inside the warehouse to tell Captain Rumlow about the new mission. Moving back through the warehouse, I pass the soldiers who were moving crates of weapons around amongst the dead bodies that littered the floor. I move up to the second floor and reach the room where I last saw Brock. But before my hand could reach the doorknob, the door swung open and the captain stepped out of the room. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of the bloody mess inside. The captain also had blood splattered over his shield military uniform. Whatever happened inside, I could be sure that the disgusting old man didn't die peacefully. Agent Romanoff, Brock questioned as he closed the door behind him. Taking my mind off the dead pig, I debriefed the young man on the current situation and our new mission. So we're going after the Hulk? Brock asked as an unreadable look passed through his hazel eyes. Yes, but we are just going to talk to him. This is a recruitment mission. If you have worries or if you are still worn out from this assignment, I could ask Coulson to. Sounds fun. Brock interrupted me as a small barbaric smile came to his face. Solensky Plaza, Russia. Omniscient POV. As Brock and his men packed up what they could of the stolen weapons and took off in the shield jump jet. A wavy translucent figure phased through the walls of the warehouse. The figure examined the bodies on the first floor for a second before moving to the ones on the second. Once it reached the room where Brock killed Giagori, the figure faded into existence in front of the body. They were wearing an all-white skin-tight tactical armored suit with a hood covering the helmeted face. 5 glowing red eyes lined the faceplate as the person bent down to examine Giagori's mutilated body. They stayed there for a long moment, mentally going over what happened in their head before taking out an incendiary grenade from their suit and throwing it on top of the carcass. As the body and the surrounding room caught flame, the figure faded out of sight and phased back through the warehouse walls it came in from. Shield jump jet. 5 hours later. Brock POV. So what's our plan of action? I asked the woman seated next to me as I pulled off the bloody uniform top and replaced it. Natasha didn't answer me at first, but as I glanced over at her, she quickly turned her head toward the window and answered, "Just let me do the talking." Was she just checking me out? No way, right? As I continued to change into a fresh uniform on the jet, I dismissed the stray thought as wishful thinking and reflected on my past encounters with the Hulk. It would be bullshit to say I wasn't still afraid. I mean, the guy knew how to leave a lasting impression on someone. But with that fear also came excitement. Since gaining these powers, I never really had a challenging fight. Granted, I always planned beforehand to end the fights quickly. But still, I wanted something more. I wanted to test how strong I've become. I wanted to see how I fared against someone formidable. My heart pumped and my blood began running hot at just the thought of the fight. I knew this mission would probably end peacefully, but a guy can hope, right? West Bengal, India, Kolkata. 6 hours later. Omniscient POV. A young girl sprints across the busy street of Kolkata. She runs through a crowd of people before rushing down a busy alleyway and runs up the stairs inside a small rundown house. Opening the door, the young girl passes cots of sleeping sick people as she moves closer to a middle-aged man who is acting as their doctor. Before she could reach the man, a stern-looking woman appears in front of her and grabs her by the arm. In Hindi, "Who are you? Get out. There is a sickness here." The girl tries to break away from the woman but found no luck. She then turns and calls out toward the man treating patients. In Hindi, "Are you a doctor? I need a doctor. My father's not waking up. He has a fever and he's groaning, but his eyes won't open." The man hears the girl's desperate calls and turns around to move over to her. He waves the stern woman off and bends down in front of the small girl. In Hindi, "Slow down. Can you tell me what kind of symptoms your father is showing?" The girl tries to calm down and catch her breath before speaking. In Hindi, my father, he's. Not finding the words, the young girl points around toward the people lying in the cots that are sick. In Hindi, like them. The man questions as the girl nods. She then holds up a small wad of cash. In Hindi, please, help him, she cries desperately. The man looks at the girl with a sad expression on his face before he pushes her hand filled with money back toward her and grabs his bag from a nearby desk. In Hindi, take me to your father. The little girl smiles brightly and the two move out of the house and onto the busy streets. The girl leads them towards a small shack in an abandoned part of the city. As they rush across the dirt road, the little girl runs into the shack and the doctor follows behind her slowly. Unease filled the man as he enters the rundown shack, just in time to see the little girl escape through a window. He's been ditched and he realizes he's been set up. Should have taken the money up front, banner. The doctor muttered quietly to himself. You know, for a man who's supposed to be avoiding stress, you picked a hell of a place to settle. A soft voice calls out from the shadows as Natasha reveals herself to Bruce. Bruce looks at the beautiful woman and tosses his bag to the floor. Avoiding stress isn't the secret, he states simply. Then what is it? Yoga, Natasha jokes. Bruce doesn't answer her as he moves toward the window the girl jumped out of and peeps through the curtains. You had her lead me to the end of the city. Smart. I assume the whole place is surrounded. Natasha doesn't answer him this time and takes a seat at the lone table in the shack. And your actress friend, she a spy too? They start that young. Bruce continues questioning as he moves toward the table. You'd be surprised, Natasha states simply, a little nervous at seeing Bruce coming closer toward her. Who are you? Bruce asks while standing in front of the table. Natasha Romanoff. Are you here to kill me, Ms. Romanoff? 'Cause that's not going to work out for anyone. No, of course not. I'm here on behalf of S.H.I.E.L.D. A small spark of anger comes to Bruce's eyes at hearing who she works for. S.H.I.E.L.D. How'd they find me? We never lost you, Doctor. We've kept our distance, and even helped keep some other interested parties off your scent. Why, Nick Fury seems to trust you. But now we need you to come in. What if I say no? Natasha gives him a seductive smile. I'll persuade you. And what if the other guy says no? The smile fades from Natasha's face and a nervous look comes to her eyes. You've been more than a year without an incident. I don't think you want to break that streak. Well, I don't always get what I want. Doctor, we're facing a potential global catastrophe. Bruce chuckles at her words. Oh, those I actively try to avoid. Natasha pulls out a cell phone and slides it along the table. On it is an image of the Tesseract. This is the Tesseract. It has the potential energy to wipe out the entire planet. Bruce puts on his glasses and picks up the touchscreen cell phone. Examining the picture closely. What does Fury want me to do? Swallow it, he jokes, but the serious look never leaves his face. He wants you to find it. It's been taken. It emits a gamma signature that's too weak for us to trace, and no one knows gamma radiation like you do. If there was, that's where I'd be. Bruce takes a moment to comprehend her words. So Fury isn't after the monster? He asks. Not that he's told me. And he tells you everything. A soft smile comes to Natasha's lips at that. Talk to Fury, he needs you on this. An angry look takes hold of Bruce's face and he moves to loom over the seated Natasha. You mean he needs me in a cage? Natasha's hand slowly creeps down to the gun hidden underneath the table. No one's going to put you in a. Stop lying to me. Bruce yells and moves to crash his hands down on the table, but stops once he feels the cold barrel of a gun pressed firmly against his temple. Make another move and we see how killable you really are. A cold voice whispers from behind him. Bruce raises his hand in surrender as Natasha stands, pulls a gun, and aims at him. A worried smile comes to Bruce's face. I'm sorry. That was mean. I just wanted to see what you'd do. It was just a joke. Bruce explains, but the two weapons aimed at him don't lower. You're not fucking funny. The cold voice states as Natasha just stares at Bruce, her heart beating like crazy at the sudden outburst. Noted. Look, why don't we do this the easy way where you guys don't shoot me and the other guy doesn't make a mess? Okay, Natasha. Bruce offers. Natasha takes a moment to consider their next move before she sighs and lowers her weapon. She nods toward Brock standing behind Bruce, and the young man lowers his gun and steps back, away from the doctor. His hazel eyes still on alert for any sudden moves. Stand down. We're good here. Brock speaks into an earpiece, and the horde of armed guards surrounding the shack outside lower their weapons. Thought it was just you and me. Bruce questions Natasha, but the woman just gives him a wary look. I never said I was alone. 2012. Classified location, SHIELD helicarrier, conference room. A few hours later, Fury POV. I stand in the middle of the dark conference room as 5 shadowy figures yell at me from multiple viewing screens. This is out of line, Director. You're dealing with forces you can't control. One of the figures shouts. You ever been in a war, Councilman? In a firefight, did you feel an overabundance of control then? I question the screen. You're saying that this, Asgard, is declaring war on our planet? The figure on the right asked. Not Asgard, Loki. I corrected. He can't be working alone. What about the other one, his brother? Our intelligence says Thor is not hostile. But he's worlds away and we can't depend on him to help either. It's up to us, which is why you should be focusing on Phase 2, it was designed for exactly this purpose. The figure in the middle exclaimed. Phase 2 isn't ready, our enemy is. We need a response team. I state, the Avengers initiative was shut down for a reason, Director. This isn't about the Avengers. We're running the world's greatest covert security network and you're gonna leave the fate of the human race to a handful of freaks. The screen questions. I'm not leaving anything to anyone. We need a response team. These people may be isolated, unbalanced even, but I believe, with the right push, they can be exactly what we need. War isn't won by sentiment, Director. The last figure, and the one who held the most sway, finally spoke up. No, it's won by soldiers. SHIELD jump jet, omniscient POV. A high-tech jet soars over the vast blue ocean. Inside, Natasha sits beside Brock as they eye the doctor seated across from them with caution. You know you guys can relax. I'm not going to do anything stupid. Bruce says as he notices the 2 agents staring at him. Natasha stayed silent and continued to watch the man with vigilance. After his last little stunt, she wasn't going to let him catch her off guard again. But Brock breaks the silence as a small smile plays on his lips and he lets out an amused chuckle. You know we've met before, he says, and Bruce gives the young man a look of confusion. We have, yup, I was a part of the unit General Ross led to capture you back in 2010. A small spark of anger showed on Bruce's face at his words, but remembering the decimation he left in his wake back then, the anger was quickly replaced with shame. Look, I'm sorry if I caused any of your friends harm. Oh, don't worry, you just killed most of them and made them disband the unit. Brock interrupted. Sadness and shame took hold of Bruce and he lowers his head. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I wasn't as controlled back then as I am now. I'm sorry, he says in a small apologetic voice, but the smile on Brock's face never leaves. Don't worry about it, it was Ross's fault for going after you in the first place. Bruce looks up, surprised by the young man's forgiving words. He opens his mouth to speak but is interrupted as the pilot calls out, Sir, we're approaching the base. Brock nods at the pilot's words as everyone moves towards the aircraft door. Outside, the jump jet flies to a giant helicarrier hovering in the water, the SHIELD logo emblazed on it in all its glory. Armed personnel move about all over the vessel, some strapping down jets and containers as the others guard around the helicarrier. The jump jet lands. Natasha, Brock, and Bruce step out of it and are met by 2 familiar faces. How was the mission? Coulson asks as Natasha leads the group over to him. She gestures back at a nervous Bruce standing behind her. We got it done. Natasha looks over at the tall blonde-haired man standing beside Coulson. Oh, Agent Romanoff, this is Captain Steve Rogers. Coulson introduced the 2. Steve gives the woman a polite smile and reaches his hand out. Ma'am. Natasha shakes his hand. Hi, she says simply. They let go and Steve eyes the 2 men standing behind her. Dr. Bruce Banner. He'll be helping us find out where Loki took the Tesseract. Coulson stated. Bruce gave the man a polite wave. Dr. Banner. Steve nodded toward him and moved his eyes over to the black-haired young man next to him. And this is Captain Rumlow. He runs our STRIKE team. Coulson introduced. Steve raised his eyebrow at the young man's rank and studied him a little closer. Honored to meet you, sir. I've heard a lot of stories. Brock says calmly and reaches a hand out towards Steve. Bit young for a soldier. How old are you, son? Steve questions as the 2 shake hands. I'm 20, sir. Brock lied. Steve gives the young man a considerable look and shakes his head. I was 5 years older than you when I first joined the army, let alone become a captain. You must be quite talented. I only try, sir, Brock said modestly. Steve nods at the young man's words as another SHIELD agent moves over toward the group. They need you on the flight deck, they're starting the face trace. The agent says to Coulson, who gives the agent a small nod. All right, Captain Rumlow, you and your men try to get some rest. I want you all ready for anything that comes. Coulson orders as he follows the agent to the flight deck. Looks like I can finally get some sleep. See you three later, Brock says as he walks to the interior of the helicarrier, leaving as Natasha, Steve and Bruce get to know each other. It was quite the buzz around here, finding you in the ice. Thought Coulson was gonna swoon. Did he ask you to sign his Captain America trading cards yet? Natasha asks. Steve gives her a confused look. Trading cards, they're vintage. He's very proud. The two hear a noise behind them and look back to see Banner, who is bumping into people while he observes the carrier. Steve moves over toward the man and taps him on the shoulder. Word is you can find the cube. Bruce turns around and eyes the captain suspiciously. Is that the only word on me? He asks. Only word I care about, Steve states simply. Bruce studies the captain for a moment before nodding his head. Must be strange for you, all of this, he says while gesturing toward the jets and crates around them. Well, this is actually kind of familiar, Steve says as Natasha walks over and joins the two. Gentlemen, you might want to step inside. It's gonna get a little hard to breathe, she warns as a voice calls out over the intercom. Flight mode. Secure the deck. There is a loud whirring and clunking sound and Bruce and Steve make their way to the edge of the helicarrier. They watch as propellers begin to spin and the helicarrier begins to lift into the air, ascending higher and higher. SHIELD helicarrier. Nick Fury's office. Fury POV. How was the mission? Anything of note? I called out to the seemingly empty room while seated at my desk. The air in front of me shifts as a white armored figure fades into existence. Nothing to report. The target didn't do anything but his assignment. I shake my head at her words, frustrated. My gut was telling me something was up with the STRIKE team, but I couldn't find any evidence to give me confirmation, and now with the Tesseract being taken and an imminent threat on its way, I don't have the time to worry about what Pierce's dogs are up to. Keep eyes on him. With Natasha focused on finding Barton, you are the only one I have on this. If he tries anything, kill him. The helmeted figure cocks her head to the side at Fury's words but doesn't say anything. The air shifts around her as she simply fades out of view. 2012. Classified location. SHIELD helicarrier. A few minutes later. Omniscient POV. Maximum performance during takeoff. Output is stable, and power systems performing at capacity. We are clear. One of the SHIELD technicians calls out as Rogers and Banner follow Natasha into the command brig. Natasha peels away from them as they stare and observe around in awe. The brig is very busy, as SHIELD personnel moves around the command center, working at stations, and communicating over earpieces. A tall woman with short dark brunette hair and blue eyes stands at the helm of the brig, watching over the working technicians. All engines operating. SHIELD Emergency Protocol 193.6 in effect. We're at level, ma'am. A tech reports to the tall woman. Good. Let's vanish. Maria Hill orders. Engaging retro reflection panels. The tech announces as the underside of the helicarrier appears to become coated with mirrors and blends in with its outer surroundings. As the helicarrier continues to soar through the sky, Nick Fury walks through the doors of the command brig and receives a salute from Maria and the other agents. All systems are operational and reflection panels are engaged, sir, Maria reports as Fury gives her a nod and looks over towards the two men standing off to the side. Dr. Banner, thank you for coming, he says as he walks over and extends his hand. Thanks for asking nicely, Bruce states as he shakes Fury's hand. So, how long am I staying? Bruce asks. Fury eyes the man with an unreadable look. Once we get our hands on the Tesseract and secure it, you can go back to your life. Bruce nods at the man's words, taking them at face value. Well, where are you with that? He asks. Coulson steps up from the side and answers for Fury. We're sweeping every wirelessly accessible camera on the planet. Cell phones, laptops, street cams, if it's connected to a satellite, it's eyes and ears for us. Bruce takes a moment to think before opening his mouth to speak. It's still not gonna be enough to find them in time. You have to narrow your field. How many spectrometers do you have access to? He questions. How many do you need? Fury asks. Call every lab you know. Tell them to put the spectrometers on the roof and calibrate them for gamma rays. I'll rough out a tracking algorithm, basic cluster recognition. At least we could rule out a few places. Do you have somewhere for me to work? A smirk comes to Fury's face at Bruce's words and he turns toward Natasha, who was quietly observing the conversation. Agent Romanoff, would you show Dr. Banner to his laboratory, please? Natasha gives Fury a look before reluctantly walking over to Bruce and leading him and Steve out of the brig area. As the door closes behind them, Fury turns over to Maria. Hill, were you the one who told the council that Barton had been compromised? He questions the woman. Maria shakes her head. No, sir. I usually wait for you to talk to them. Fury's face takes on a contemplative look as he walks out of the brig and onto the air deck, Maria following behind him. Is something wrong, sir? Maria asks as Fury looks out at the open sky around them. I don't know. I just feel like we're missing something. Something big. Maria stays quiet for a second and thinks about the director's words. Did you inform the council who exactly is on your response team, sir? Fury looks over his shoulder at the woman. Didn't have to, they already knew. Shield helicarrier, barracks level. Brock POV. Knock, knock. My eyes move over toward the door of my private quarters as two concise knocks ring out. Letting out a sigh, I drag myself from the bed of my small room and move over to the door. Opening it to reveal Sidwell's Weasley face standing in front of me. You were supposed to report to me as soon as you returned. The man said, giving me a look that I think was supposed to inspire fear. I just stared back at Sidwell blankly, prompting the man to say whatever it is he needed to say. Sidwell gives me a furious look but says nothing as he reaches into his jacket pocket, pulled out a plain black envelope, and handed it to me. Next time I give you an order, I expect you to follow it. Remember who your betters are, he exclaimed. At the small man's words and tone, my brow cocked, and a spark of anger formed in my eyes. Reaching out, I took hold of the letter and in the same motion wrapped my other hand around the worm's flimsy throat. Pulling him close to me, I glared down at his terrified face. What are you doing? I'll have you. Shut the fuck up, I ordered calmly and coldly. Sweat began to collect atop Sidwell's bald head and his hand shook as he tried uselessly to free himself from my grasp. I think you're the one who needs to be reminded. I don't work for you. You're nothing more than a mouthpiece for Secretary Pierce. So watch your tone, I said as I released his neck and pushed him out the doorway. Sidwell held his throat and took frantic deep breaths. Next time just give me the letter and leave, I said and closed the door on the recovering Sidwell. Moving over to the couch in the middle of the room, I opened the small envelope and studied its contents. Details of my new assignment were written inside. Seemed like Hydra wanted me to stick close to Fury's new team, watching and waiting for an opportune moment to seize the Tesseract. Letting out a bored sigh, I grab a lighter from my desk, walk over to the kitchen sink, and burn the letter. Watching until it was nothing more than ash circling the drain. No rest for the wicked, I guess, I mutter under my breath as I leave the comfort of my small room and head out to work. Loki's underground lab. Omniscient POV. Hey, this is wonderful. The Tesseract has shown me so much. It's more than knowledge, it's truth. Eric announces as Loki and Clint enter the makeshift lab. Eric and Clint's eyes glow a bright blue as they are under the mind-controlling power of Loki's scepter. I know. It touches everyone differently, Loki states while smirking at the crazed scientist. He turns his head to Clint. What did it show you, Agent Barton? Loki asks. Clint gives the god a stiff look. My next target. Eric lets a manic chuckle at the archer's words. Stick in the mud. You've got no soul. No wonder you chose this tomb for us to work in. At Eric's mocking words, Clint just continues to stare stiffly, like a robot. This place gives us 3 levels of lead-lined flooring between shield and that cube, he states dryly. Eric ignores him and walks back to the machine he was working on. I see why Fury chose you to guard it. You seem adept at your work, Loki says. Clint doesn't register Loki's praise and just gives him a vacant look. You're going to have to contend with Fury sometime, sir. As long as he's in the wind, I can't pin him down. And he'll be putting together a team. Are they a threat? Loki asks, the amused smirk never leaving his face. To each other more so than you, sir. But if Fury can get him on track, and he might, they could throw some noise our way. I want to know everything you can tell me about this team of his. I would test their mettle. Clint nods. Other than them, there is also the STRIKE team. They shouldn't pose much of a problem, but their captain is skilled. Loki laughs at Clint's words, unconcerned. You mortals love to overestimate yourselves. Loki looks over to the glowing scepter in his hand. But I'll show you. I'll show them all what it means to be a true god. 2012. Classified location. SHIELD helicarrier. Next day. Omniscient POV. Coulson and Steve are standing on the bridge of the helicarrier, just waiting as they watch the technicians work. I mean, if it's not too much trouble, Coulson says as he hands over an old set of Captain America cards that seem to be kept in mint condition. No, it's fine. Steve takes the cards from Coulson's hand, a little impressed by the man's collection. It's a vintage set, took me a couple of years to collect them all. Near mint, slight foxing around the edges, but we got a hit on the face trace. 67% match. Weight cross match, 89%. One of the techs interrupts. Coulson, forgetting the previous conversation, moves over to the tech station. Location, he asks. Stuttgart, Germany. He's not exactly hiding, sir. Coulson nods and pats the tech on the shoulder. Good work, he says before turning around towards Steve. Captain, you're up. A determined look takes over Steve's face as he gives Coulson a wholehearted nod and walks out of the brig to prepare. He makes his way towards the armory and the door slides open to reveal a new and improved Captain America suit displayed on the wall. Steve walks over to it and stares at his new uniform, feeling a small sense of nervousness as well as longing. Hope it fits, he mutters to himself. Stuttgart, Germany. 2 hours later, a large Quinjet speeds across the cloudy night skies as it makes its way towards the drop point. Inside, Natasha and a freshly geared up Steve prepare their weapons as Brock double-checks his small unit of men to make sure they are ready. Sir, we're getting reports from local PD about a horned individual waving around a glowing staff and causing a large commotion at the target location. One of the STRIKE team agents reports. Brock nods and looks over towards Steve. Sounds like our guy, he states calmly. Steve nods his head in agreement. We should go over our plan of attack. Natasha chimes in. Steve grabs the shield sitting at his side and straps it to the holster on his back. Simple, I'll go in and neutralize this guy. You guys stay here and provide cover fire from the air. Steve says simply. With all due respect, Captain, that doesn't sound like a suitable plan. Brock speaks up. Steve glances over at the young man, surprised he disagreed with him. You have something better, he asks genuinely. Brock takes a moment to think before he answers. You can still go in to distract the target, while Natasha and the pilot provide cover with the Quinjet. Meanwhile, the rest of my men and I will covertly secure the surroundings to make sure the target doesn't have any exits and keep civilian casualties to a minimum. Steve nods and eyes the young man, seeing him in a new light. Good idea, soldier, he says and gives Brock an approving smile. Arriving over drop zone in T-2 minutes. The pilot announces and everyone grabs their gear and queues up at the bay doors. The Quinjet silently pulls up to the location, only to see a mob of nicely dressed people huddled together in front of the plaza of the Gala building. Each were kneeling in front of a lanky man wearing a gold-horned helmet and pointing a spear-like scepter at the crowd. An old German man looks to be trying to stand up to the horned man just as the bay doors open and Captain America, not waiting for the plane to get to a safe level, jumps from the Quinjet. As he descends through the air, he pulls his shield from his back and holds it in front of him before landing in front of the old man just as Loki fires a blue energy beam from his scepter. The beam hits the shield and is reflected back to Loki, smacking into him and planting him face down on the ground. Captain America begins monologuing while moving slowly closer toward Loki. Loki dusts himself off, gets to his feet, and starts trading quips with the captain as the Quinjet stealthy hovers a few feet away and Brock and his small unit disembark. Throngs of people scatter past them as they move to create a perimeter around the plaza. The unit gets into position just as the Quinjet comes back around and hovers behind Captain America. I'm not the one who's out of time, he says to Loki as a high-tech minigun unfolds from the underside of the plane. Loki, drop the weapon and stand down. Black Widow announces over the Quinjet speaker. A smug smile comes to Loki's face as he ignores the woman and fires his scepter at the jet, which banks hard to the right in order to avoid it. The beam skims the wing and starts to shake uncontrollably, but the pilot quickly regains control. Captain America charges to attack Loki and the two begin their fight. In the distance, a figure wearing a metal suit can be seen soaring through the air above, headed towards their location. Stuttgart, Germany. A few minutes later. Brock POV. This is fucking stupid, I mutter to myself as I watch Iron Man and Captain America quickly dispatch Loki, who suddenly raises his hands in surrender. One of my soldiers brings the two a pair of handcuffs and I observe them patiently take Loki, the same guy who threatened to use what could be equivalent to a nuclear bomb on national soil, into custody. They could kill this guy right now and try to secure the cube after, but no. Let's take the guy, who is literally the god of lying, for interrogation. I get why this had to happen in the movie, but seeing such a dumb self-righteous decision being made in person was something else. The Quinjet hovers over the plaza before landing in front of the two heroes. Captain Rumlow, secure this man onto the plane. Captain America orders as Loki is cuffed with his hands behind his back. The smug smirk never leaving his face. My men and I move to escort Loki, who eyes me for a second before completely dismissing me, onto the Quinjet as the two heroes exchange greetings. Mr. Stark, Cap says and nods at the armored billionaire. Captain. Tony returns the nod. An awkward silence hangs throughout the plaza as neither of them knows what to say next. Tony clears his throat and points over to the Quinjet. Can I get a ride? Quinjet. A few minutes later. Omniscient POV. The Quinjet speeds over some mountains and continues to soar through the darkened cloudy night skies. Natasha sits in the cockpit with the pilot while Brock and the STRIKE team guard their new prisoner. Loki is strapped down to a chair in the back of the plane, his eyes moving about the jet and observing everything around him. Cap, in his suit but no cowl, and Tony, in the armor but without his helmet, are standing behind the cockpit as they talk. I don't like it, Steve says as a serious contemplative look overtakes his face. What, Rock of Ages giving up so easily? Tony jokes. I don't remember it being that easy. This guy packs a wallop, I could tell when fighting him, so he should have put up more of a fight. Still, you were pretty spry, for an older fellow. What's your thing? Pilates, Tony quips. Steve, interrupted from his train of thought, gives Tony a confused look. What, it's like calisthenics. You might have missed a couple of things. You know, doing time as a capsicle. Tony smirks as an annoyed look comes to the captain's face. Fury didn't tell me he was calling you in. Tony lets out a chuckle at his words. Yeah, there's a lot of things Fury probably doesn't tell you. A flash of lightning and the loud roaring of thunder outside interrupts their conversation. Skies were supposed to be clear, where's this come from? Natasha asks the pilot who just shrugs his shoulders in confusion. As more lightning and thunder cloud the sky, Loki leans forward from his strapped-down position and looks around nervously. What's the matter? Scared of a little lightning? Steve asks, noticing the man's change in demeanor. I'm just not overly fond of what follows, Loki says as a wave of lightning shoots through the sky and crashes on top of the Quinjet. 2012. Quinjet. Omniscient POV. The Quinjet flies above the mountain and through the raging lightning storm, as a loud crash sounds above the jet. Brock looks over and sees Tony, Steve, and Natasha staring at the roof, shocked and anxious as footsteps ring out above. They each move to the viewing port to see a shadowy figure holding onto the Quinjet. The lightning flashes, illuminating the figure just enough for them to make out it was 4. God of Thunder, hangs atop the jet. Here we go, Brock mutters. There's another flash of light as the people around him come back to their senses and start doing their jobs. Natasha orders the pilot to speed up. Steve runs for his seat and grabs his cowl and shield, while Tony grabs his helmet which attaches itself to the suit. Tony pushes a button and opens the ramp of the jet. What are you doing? Don't open the door for him. Steve yells as the wind rushes into the jet. Thor swings down from the top and enters, jumping down onto the ramp. He looks around the jet until his eyes land on Loki strapped to a chair. An enraged expression overtakes his face as he marches towards him, ignoring everyone else. Iron Man reaches a hand out to stop him but Thor backhands him and sends him barreling into Cap, both hitting the floor of the cockpit. Thor makes his way to Loki as Brock pulls his sidearm and makes a faux attempt to stop him. Bang, bang, bang. Shots ring out as the bullets bounce off of Thor, who just ignores Brock and grabs Loki by the neck. Two of the STRIKE team agents went for their rifles to fire at him, but he just casually threw his hammer at them, knocking them back and sending them spiraling out of the jet. The hammer returns to his hand as he rips Loki free from the bindings of the chair and jumps out of the Quinjet. A silent moment passes as the realization of the situation hits everyone. Who the hell was that guy? Iron Man yells as he and Cap pick themselves off the floor. Thor Odinson, another Asgardian and Loki's brother, Brock informs him as he makes a half-hearted check on his men's condition. I thought he was supposed to be friendly, guess not. Captain America states, doesn't matter. If he frees Loki or kills him, the Tesseract may be lost. Natasha calls back from the cockpit. Iron Man begins walking to the edge of the ramp. Stark, we need a plan of attack. Cap yells after him. Iron Man reaches the lip of the ramp and looks back over his shoulder. I have a plan. Attack, he says as he jumps from the jet. Brock cringes a little inside, and watches from the side as Iron Man flies out, following Thor, as Cap makes for a parachute. Sir, aren't we going to make a plan? Brock questions. No time, I have to stop that bastard from making things worse, Cap says as he straps on the chute and grabs his shield. I'd sit this one out, Cap, Natasha calls out from the front. I don't see how I can. Captain America moves towards the edge of the ramp. These guys come from legend, they're basically gods. She warns. Cap reaches the edge and turns his head to look back over his shoulder. There's only one god, ma'am, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't dress like that. He says as he dives out the Quinjet, head first. Forest in the mountains. Loki POV. Thor crashes down onto a cliff and throws me to the ground as I let out a groan. The idiot looms over me, anger clear on his face. How could you, brother? Thor asks coldly. I let a smug smirk come to my lips. Oh ho, I missed you too, brother. Thor reaches down and grabs my collar, pulling me up to his face. Do I look to be in the mood for your games? He says as he glares into my eyes. Oh, you should be thanking me. With the Bifrost gone, how much dark energy did the All-Father have to muster to conjure you here? Your precious earth, I ask, the smirk never leaving my face. Thor drops his hammer to the ground and punches me hard in the face. Arg, I grunt as the pain hits me. What is he doing? Where is the Tesseract? And what have you done with Fandral and Volstagg? He yells in my face. I look at him with a little confusion. What are yo? Thor doesn't let me talk as he punches me in the face again. Erg, I shriek as flashes cloud my vision and blood drips down my eye. They were our friends. Thor yells. What happened to you? How could you turn so vile? We were raised together, we played together, we fought together. Do you remember none of that? He questioned and I could hear the emotion in his voice. He gave me an expectant look and I took the moment to recover. Shaking off the pain, I glare up into his eyes. I remember a shadow, living in the shade of your greatness. I remember you tossing me into an abyss. I who was, and should be, king. I exclaimed. I didn't know what he was talking about, but this, loving brother, act struck my nerve. So you take away my friends and try to destroy the world I love as recompense for your imagined slights. No, I won't let you. They're under my protection, Loki. I laugh mockingly in his face. And you're doing such a marvelous job at that, dear brother. The humans slaughter each other in droves, while you idly fret. I mean to rule them. Thor gives me a sad, pitying look. You think yourself above them. He states quietly. Yes, I announce enthusiastically. I've seen worlds you've never known about. I have grown, Odinson, in my exile. I have seen the true power of the Tesseract, and when I wield it. Thor punches me in the face again. Erg, and who showed you this power, Who controls the would-be king? Thor yells. Blood fills my mouth, but I just spit it out and give my brother a mad smile. I am a king. Thor drops me to the ground and summons Mjolnir up to his hand. Not here, you're not. You will answer for your crimes at home. You will give up the Tesseract and abandon this poisonous dream. He orders. I let an innocent look overtake my face. I don't have the Tesseract. And I don't know what happened to Fandral and Volstagg. I say playfully. Rage comes to Thor's face and he points the hammer at my head. You listen well, brother. He starts, but is cut off as the man with the metal armor flies in and tackles Thor, carrying him off to crash through the trees. A playful smile comes to my lips. I'm listening. I call out to the empty air. Quinjet, forest in the mountains. Brock POV. There they are. Natasha points out as the pilot hovers the Quinjet over a small clearing in the forest. I move over to her and look down to see Iron Man firing a repulsor blast at Thor, who takes it head on and is only knocked back a few feet. The two stand ready and then fly at each other, smashing through the trees and scraping up a cliffside. Trees are toppled as they crash into the forest grounds, but they stand quickly and Thor sends in a hard left hook that rocks Iron Man to the side. He moves and tries to throw a counter, but Thor grabs his fist. Iron Man tries to strike out with his other hand and Thor grabs the too. He begins to crush Iron Man's gauntlets in his hands with ease. Shouldn't we help? Natasha asks me, but I just shrug. I say let them work it out. Iron Man opens his palm, aims it at Thor's face, and fires a blast at point blank. But it seems to do nothing to Thor, so he headbutts him. Thor takes the hit with ease and headbutts him back. Iron Man is sent flying back through the trees and comes to a stop before launching himself at Thor. He grabs Thor and throws him into a tree that snaps in half at the force. Thor then stands and the two go at it for a bit longer, the battle descending into a fist fight. Thor summons his hammer and moves to slam it down on Iron Man's chest, but he dodges, causing Thor to fall. Thor quickly picks himself off the ground as Iron Man swoops in and tries to hit him. Thor rights himself and prepares to counter the hit. They each get ready to send blows at each other until suddenly Cap's shield rams into them and ricochets off both their chest. Captain America runs into the clearing and leaps to catch his shield. He lands down in front of them and approaches the two. Everyone stops fighting as Cap seems to try and talk the two down, but Thor suddenly swings his hammer back and smacks it into Iron Man's head, sending him flying back. Thor then leaps and swings Mjolnir down as Captain America raises his shield over his head. Boom! When the two connect, there is a loud thunderclap and a flash of light, and the two are both thrown backward. A moment passes as they slowly get to their feet and stare at each other. The fight presumably over. That was crazy, Natasha praises, but I didn't answer her this time. My face stayed the same emotionless mask I usually wore as I watched the fight, but inside my heart was pounding fast and my blood was so hot that it felt like lava was running through my veins. I wanted to be down there. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. 2012. Classified location, SHIELD helicarrier. A few hours later, Loki POV. I was escorted down the halls of a strange aircraft by a troop of armed guards, led by the boy they prop up as a captain. He and his men walk me past a window showing a high-tech lab with a bunch of strange instruments. Inside, the monster masking himself as a man was working. Keep moving, the boy captain orders, and one of his soldiers shoves me forward. I glance back at him but don't say anything. Let these mortals feel like they're in control, for a little while at least. A playful smirk comes to my face as I send one last glance through the window at the monstrous doctor, who removes his glasses and stares back at me. The boy captain leads me to a room with a cylindrical glass cage in the middle and locks me inside. Is this supposed to hold me? I question, but the mortal doesn't answer me as Fury walks through the door. The boy gives him a salute, but Fury just waves him off. Leave us, he orders, and the boy leaves the room. Fury walks over to a control panel in front of the cage and presses a button. In case it's unclear, if you try to escape or you so much as scratch that glass. He presses another button on the panel and the floor beneath the cell retracts, revealing the open sky below. 30,000 feet straight down in a steel trap. You get how that works. He threatens and presses the button to close the floor. Fury points toward me. Ant. He gestures to the control panel. Boot. He fixes me a glare, but the playful smirk never leaves my face. It's an impressive cage, but not built for me, I think. Built for something a lot stronger than you. Fury responds. At his words, my smirk grows to a large smile. Oh, I've heard. You have a mindless beast that makes play he's still a man. How desperate must you have become, that you call on such misplaced creatures to defend you? I ask sportively. At my words, a look of anger takes hold of Fury's face and he moves slowly toward my cage. How desperate? You threaten my world with war, you steal a power you can't hope to control, you strut around thinking yourself some kind of enlightened being, but you kill 'cause it's fun. You have made me very desperate. But you might not be happy that you did. I just continue to smile as the man finishes his rant. Ooh, how it must burn you to have come so close, to have the Tesseract, to have power, unlimited power, and for what? A warm light for all you mortals to share. I chuckle, mockingly, in his face. No, I think not. I think you wanted to be the one to harness its power, but I came along to remind you what real power is. I state. Fury just eyes me for a moment before an unnerving smile came to his weathered face. Well, let me know if, real power, wants a magazine or something. He jokes before he turns around and exits the room, leaving me alone in this glass prison. Don't think I'll be here that long, I mutter behind the man. SHIELD helicarrier. Brock POV. The Avengers and I watched as the monitor on the large conference room table, which was showing the interrogation, shuts off, and Steve, in his Captain America suit but with no cowl, looks over our misfit group. Loki's gonna drag this out. We need to know what he's planning. he states and looks over to Thor. So, Thor, what's his play? Thor didn't say anything at first, deciding whether or not to help us, but quickly made up his mind. He has an army called the Chitauri. They're not of Asgard nor any world I've known. He means to lead them against your people. They will win him the earth, in return, I suspect, for the Tesseract. Thor explains. Steve gives him a bewildered look. An army, from outer space? He questions but Thor just nods. He'll need to build another portal then, like the one in New Mexico, I state. That's probably what he took Eric Selvig for. Natasha agrees. Thor looks over toward the woman, a worried look on his face. Selvig, he questions. He's an astrophysicist. Bruce chimes in. I know, he's a friend. Is he okay? Thor asks. To our knowledge, yes. Loki has him under some kind of spell, along with one of ours. Natasha explains but Thor's look of worry doesn't lessen. I wanna know why Loki even let us take him. He's not gonna be leading an army from here. Steve says. Maybe he wanted to weaken his opposition before he calls his forces. I voice and Steve nods his head, agreeing with me. I don't think we should be focusing on Loki. That guy's brain is a bag full of cats, you can smell crazy on him, Bruce exclaims. Thor shakes his head at his words. My brother may be beyond reason, but he is not crazy. When he does something abnormal, it is usually intentional. He says, regret for his brother's actions plain on his face. A look comes to Natasha's face and she moves over to an abandoned terminal. After typing for a minute, a smile appears on her face. Looking at the details from the gala in Germany, there were some iridium that was stolen there. What would Loki need with that? Natasha explains. It's a stabilizing agent, probably used to stop the portal from collapsing in on itself. Bruce starts but is interrupted as Tony and Coulson walk through the door. I'm saying, take a weekend. I'll even fly you to Portland myself. Keep love alive, Tony whispers to Coulson, who just gives the billionaire a polite smirk and quickly separates from him. Tony looks around at the people in the conference room and moves over toward Thor, giving the man a soft pat on the shoulder. No hard feelings, Point Break, you got a mean swing. Thor gives Tony a look as the cocky man walks over to one of the helicarrier control panels. Steve glares at Tony but doesn't say anything and motions for Bruce to continue. It also means the portal can open as wide and as long as Loki wants. Raise the mizzen mast, ship to topsails. That man is playing Galaga. Thought we wouldn't notice, but we did. Tony exclaims jokingly, interrupting Bruce again, as everyone gives him a strange look. Steve slams his hand down on the conference table, gaining everyone's attention, including Tony's. Do you mind finding somewhere else to play? Some people are trying to actually work. Steve says and gives the billionaire an annoyed look. Even I had to admit, the guy was kinda irritating to be around. Like a kid starving for attention. At his outburst, Tony just gives him his best smile. Sounds exhausting, he states simply before turning back around and messing with the console screens, as I watch him stick a device to the underside of the console. Loki will need a lot of the raw materials, which Agent Barton can get his hands on pretty easily. The only major component that will be a problem to get is a power source of high energy density. Something to kick-starts the cube. Tony says, finishing Bruce's explanation. When did you become an expert in thermonuclear astrophysics? Bruce asks. Last night. The packet, Selvig's notes, the extraction theory papers, am I the only one who did the reading? Tony states cockily and sends a look from over his shoulder to Steve. Does Loki need any particular kind of power source? Steve asks begrudgingly, an annoyed look still on his face. He'll have to heat the cube to 120 million Kelvin just to break through the Coulomb barrier, Tony continues. Unless Selvig has figured out how to stabilize the quantum tunneling effect, Bruce adds, and Tony turns around to face him. Well, if he could do that, he could achieve heavy ion fusion at any reactor on the planet, Tony says and moves over to Bruce, his hand extended. Finally, someone who can keep up. The two shake hands. It's good to meet you, Dr. Banner. Your work on anti-electronic collisions is unparalleled. And I'm a huge fan of the way you lose control and turn into an enormous green rage monster. Tony exclaims. Thanks, Bruce says while giving the man an apprehensive look. The door to the conference room opens again as all S.H.I.E.L.D. personnel stands and salutes Nick Fury as he walks into the room. Fury waves them all off before shifting his one eye towards me. Captain Rumlow, I want you and your men to run point on watch duty for our prisoner. He stated, dismissing me from the meeting. I quirked an eyebrow at Fury's words, annoyed at being dismissed, but still moved to follow his orders. Yes sir. Natasha and Steve looked like they wanted to say something, but Fury just continued the meeting as I walked out of the conference room doors. SHIELD helicarrier. 2 hours later. Loki POV. I paced around the glass cell, wondering when these mortals were going to start the real interrogation. Soft footsteps sound from behind me and I smirk knowingly. You know, there are not many people that can hope to sneak up on me, I call out and turn to face a beautiful redhead mortal. But you figured I'd come, Natasha responds, a cautious look on her face. After whatever tortures Fury could pathetically concoct, you or the boy captain would appear as a friend, as a bomb. And I suddenly would cooperate. I say, still smirking at the woman. I wanna know what you've done to Agent Barton. A chuckle escapes my lips at her words. I've only expanded his mind. Shown him his rightful place in this vast universe. Anger came to her face and she unconsciously moves closer to my cage. As your slave, Natasha questions. It's only natural, I state simply. And once you've won, once you're king of the mountain, what happens to him then? My smirk grows to a full-fledged smile. Is this love I'm detecting, Agent Romanoff? I ask and the redhead snorts mockingly. Love is for children, I only owe him a debt. She responds. Want to talk about it? I ask playfully. No, least not with you. At her words, another chuckle escapes my lips. I like this mortal. What will you do if I vow to spare Barton? I ask. I'm not letting you out. She states. Ah, of course not. But I like this. Your world is in the balance, and yet here you are bargaining for one man. Tisk tisk very cold, Agent Romanoff. Her face goes stiff as she gives me an emotionless glare. Regimes fall every day, I tend not to weep over that, I'm Russian, or at least I was. So I've heard. Barton regaled me on your past adventures with the notorious Red Room. So, if you're not that person anymore, what are you now? She takes a moment to think over my words before she answers. It's really not that complicated. I have a lot of blood on my hands to answer for. I just want to wipe them clean. She declares, her face showing traces of regret. Can you even wipe that much blood clean? Drakov's daughter. Sao Paulo. The hospital fire. Barton told me everything. Your hands are dripping with blood and you think saving one man, who is no more virtuous than yourself, will change anything. I move closer to the glass. You mortals love to dwell in your useless sentimentalities. But the reality is, you just traded one master for another. Pathetic. You lie and kill in the service of liars and killers. You can pretend all you want to be different, to have your own code that makes up for the horrors you've committed. But they are a part of you, and they will never go away. Shut up, Natasha screams. I notice tears threatening her eyes at my words, but I didn't stop. I move closer and slam my hand against the glass. I won't touch Barton, not until I make him kill you. Slowly, intimately, in every way, he knows you fear. I watch, gleefully, as fear and anxiousness fill the mortal woman's face. Then I'll make him wake up just long enough to see his fine work, and as he screams in agony I'll split his skull. This is my only bargain, you mewling quim. I yell. Natasha turns away from the glass cage in horror. Sounds of her sobbing come to my ears as she hangs her head low. You're a monster, she exclaims. I chuckle menacingly at her words. Oh, you haven't seen anything yet. If you think I'm a monster, just wait till I turn your own pet against you. I say, laughing madly at the woman's suffering. At my words, Natasha lifts her head and turns to face me. My laughter dies as I see her face is completely dry. So, Banner, that's your play, she states as I stare at her confusedly. What? I question. Natasha turns and begins to walk out of the room as she touches something in her ear. Fury. Loki plans to unleash the Hulk on the ship. Keep Banner in the lab, I'm on my way to him. Send Thor down to babysit his brother. Natasha explains. As she reaches the door she turns back to face me and gives me a smug smile. Thank you, for your cooperation, she says before skipping, happily, out the door, leaving me alone standing, bewildered, in the glass cage. Did this wench just play me? Me, Loki, the god of mischief. Anger at having been manipulated filled my mind as I threw away my helpless act and began casting a spell. My hands moved in complex gestures as a green portal, leading to the outside of the cage, formed in front of me. Pity, I hope to buy more time, I mutter to myself as I walk through the portal, escaping easily from my prison. I quickly move to the door and cast a minor concealing illusion on myself as I open it. 3 agents that were guarding the hallway look back at the opening door, but my spell works quickly as they soon seem uninterested in the strange movement. A smug smirk comes to my face as I prepare to make my way toward my target, but something stops me in my tracks. A strange feeling nibbled at the back of my mind and I turned back to study the 3 mortals guarding the empty room. 2 of them seemed oblivious of my spell and continued their normal actions, but the third one gave off a strange feeling to me. Moving closer, I saw that the third guard turned out to be the boy captain that Barton had warned me about. Odd, what is this feeling? I move even closer, becoming face to face with the young mortal, and study his eyes. They weren't focused on me, but I still got a strange feeling, as if he could see me. I reached out a hand to touch the mortal but was surprised as my hand was suddenly caught in a vice-like grip. Why couldn't you just keep walking? The captain mutters quietly as an unbelievable amount of force smashed down onto my hand, crushing the bone. Erg, I scream as the spell around me fades, revealing me to the outside world. What? One of the other guards exclaims confusedly at the sight of a man appearing out of thin air in front of them. Moving swiftly, I placed my other hand on the young captain's head and cast another spell. As green and gold light flowed from my hand, the powerful grip holding me suddenly released and a sigh of relief escapes my lips. Stop right there. Put your hands up, the other guards ordered, realizing the situation they suddenly found themselves in. I don't even pay attention to them as my focus is completely on the young captain, who was standing stiffly like a statue in front of me. Waving my good hand, I conjured 2 daggers in the air and sent them toward the 2 mortals. The blades easily pierced their heads and made them drop lifelessly to the floor. As the blades that were embedded in their skulls disappeared, I cautiously moved closer to the frozen captain. Green and gold energy clouded around his head, showing my spell was working, but what worried me was the faint dark crimson glow that emitted from the young mortal's hazel eyes. Now, what are you? I mutter as an intrigued smile plays on my lips. 2012. Classified location, Shield Helicarrier, Loki POV. Now, what are you? I mutter, an intrigued smile playing on my lips, as I look over the young mortal who was currently trapped inside an illusion within his own mind. Sounds of bones reforming rang out in the hallway and I glanced down to my side as my crushed hand began to heal rapidly. It still hurt, but nothing permanent. This mortal was a lot stronger than he should be, especially if he is able to hurt a divine being such as myself. Is he another one of Fury's mutants? Or something else entirely? I returned my attention to the strange mortal and, gazing into his eyes, I could see a faint spark of crimson energy linger within his pupils. Reaching out with my magical perception, I tried to sense the origin of this mysterious energy. As my magic delved deeper into the boy, a wave of heavy emotions of rage and indignation hit me, making me quickly pull my perception back and recoil against the hallway wall. Sweat dripped from my brow as I struggled to take in a breath. What was that? It felt divine but also gave off a dark corruptive aura that felt like it would destroy anything it touches. It also felt alive, like it was staring right back at me. No mortal should have, whatever there was, inside them. Catching my breath, I returned my gaze back toward the unnatural, mortal, and conjured a dagger to my hand. I wished I had my scepter to completely dominate the boy's mind and find out his secrets, but I didn't have time for side projects. The dagger shot through the air as I threw it at the boy, aiming for his heart. But instead of a gory scene like I was expecting, the blade just casually bounced off his chest and clattered to the floor, deconstructing and fading into a gold mist. My head cocked to the side at that and I moved closer to inspect the spot where the dagger hit. Curious, I mutter as I reach out my hand and place it on the young man's chest. A blank look was on his face but his heart was beating fast and his whole body shook with strain as I could feel the muscles in his body straining to fight off my illusion. His hands twitch at his side as he struggled to reach me and I felt him pushing back against my magic and knew the spell wasn't strong enough to hold him. A faint crimson mist began to leak from his body as I quickly retracted my hand and moved to cast a higher version of the spell. The aircraft suddenly veers to the side, making me lose balance as the hallway lights go red and alarms begin ringing throughout the ship. Perimeter breach. We're under attack. All hands on deck. A voice informs over the intercom. Seems like my main plan was finally starting. A smirk comes to my face as a distinct monstrous roar rings out from the upper floors. Yelling and artillery also begin to sound throughout the vessel. Brother. A familiar resounding voice called out down the hallway and I let out a vexed sigh at the fool's bad timing. Could you come back a little late? My quip was swiftly interrupted as Thor tackled me from behind, sending both of us barreling through the wall and back in the room of my cell. Erg, I groaned as I hit the floor. Thor loomed over me, not seeming to feel the same pain, and grabbed me by my throat. Is this attack you as well, brother? The fool screams in my face, but I just smirk and spit a bit of blood in his eye. Erg, Thor grunts irritatingly and releases my neck to wipe the blood from his face. Taking the chance, I move back away from him, positioning myself in front of the cell's open doors, and quickly began casting a quick spell behind my back. Must you always make things harder? Stop with your tricks and just give up. Thor tries to convince me. Why would I do that, dear brother, when the fun has just begun? I provoke. Thor looked at me with pity and charged forward at me, hammer aimed for my head. His attack reached me, only to go straight through my head as the illusion vanished and Thor was sent tumbling into the glass prison. I reappear behind him and close the cell door, locking the fool inside. Are you ever not going to fall for that? I say smugly as I smile down at my confused brother. Thor glances around at the glass cage and looks back to me, unworried. You think this is enough to hold me? He says as he gets up and hits the glass door with his hammer. The glass cracks a little and the entire cage shudders at his force, but the prison holds firm. A laugh escapes me as I watch his futile attempt and move around toward the control panel Fury so willingly demonstrated to me. The humans think us immortal. Shall we test that? I ask mockingly as I press a button and the floor beneath the cage retracts, revealing the open sky. Thor peeks down through the glass to the sky below, then looks up at me with a questioning gaze. You would try to kill me, brother? I, who have been by your side, defending you, for our entire lives. Thor exclaims. A furious look overtook my face at the fool's words. Defending me? Not once did you speak up when father would ridicule me. No, you were happy to play the favorite and toss me aside like the rest. I yell, enraged. Thor opens his mouth to speak, but I don't give him a chance as my hand moves toward the console and presses the button to release the cage. White! Thor screams as he drops from the ship and falls through the clouds below. I laugh madly at the fool's suffering. Finally. I was finally out of his shadow. It's my time now, and I'm going to show everyone that ever mocked me what it means to be a true king. My laughter dies down as the room suddenly goes dark as the power throughout the ship is shut off. Barton must be almost finished with his assignment. Time to get out of here and start making my new kingdom, I murmur to myself and move my hands to conjure a portal in front of me. Leaving already? A deep, modulated voice calls out softly behind me. My body stiffens when I hear the ghostly voice and I turn my head to peek over my shoulder at whoever, or whatever just spoke. The room was pitch black, the only light coming from a figure standing in the busted-down wall. A crimson glow outlined the tall, broad figure. The only noticeable detail I was able to make out was the unnatural face of a skeleton. The mouth of the skull was somehow spread wide into a sadistic smile and crimson energy leaked from its mouth as two glowing eyes looked back at me through the darkness. What are? I'm going to fuck you up. The figure stated calmly and began to charge at me as some sort of crimson-red force field started to form around him. Not waiting to see what this thing was, I moved to jump through the portal and swiftly gestured to close it behind me. I looked back to see the crimson eyes of my attacker, still giving me that creepy sadistic smile. Be seeing you, the deep voice called out, the mouth of the head moving in an odd way as the portal shrunk and sealed. Letting out a breath I didn't know I was holding, I looked around at my new surroundings. I seemed to have made my way back to the top of the ship as I was standing in the same laboratory that I saw the pet monster working in. Walking around through the lab, I spotted a familiar golden scepter lying haphazardly on a table. These mortals really are just dumb monkeys. I voice, reaching down to pick up the weapon. Move away please. Another voice calls out behind me and I let out an aggravated breath. Looking back to see who it was interrupting me for the third time this day, I saw a balding mortal aiming a large high-tech looking firearm at me. Walk away human, I'm really not in the mood. I warn, but the mortal just gives me a smirk and gestures down at the strange contraption in his hands. Do you like this? We started working on the prototype after you sent the destroyer. Even I don't know what it does. Do you wanna find out? He states and pushes a button on the weapon. An orange glow begins to emit from the firearm as the mortal prepares to fire at me, but I don't give him the chance as I swiftly cast a spell to appear behind him. He looks around the room, confused, as I conjure a dagger into my hand and slit his throat with the blade. He lets out gurgled breaths as he drops the weapon and kneels in front of me on the floor, holding his throat. That's more like it, I say as the mortal glances at me and falls lifelessly to the floor. 2012. SHIELD Helicarrier. Conference room. 2 hours later. Omniscient POV. Steve, Tony, and Fury are all gathered at the conference table in the damaged helicarrier. Brock and Maria stand off to the side as Fury pulls a handful of cards out. He throws them down and they scatter on the table. A few were still wet with Coulson's blood. These were in Phil Coulson's jacket. Guess he never did get you to sign them, he said towards Steve, who picks up one of the cards and looks down at it with a sad look on his face. We're dead in the air up here. Our communications are down, the location of the cube is still unknown, Natasha is in critical condition, and Banner, 4, and Barton are still in the wind. Fury explains to them as he paces slowly around the table. The council believed that the best way to protect ourselves was to build an arsenal using the power of the Tesseract. But I never put all my chips on that number, though, because I was playing something even riskier. Fury stops pacing and stands behind Steve and Tony's chairs. There was an idea, Stark knows this, called the Avengers Initiative. The idea was to bring together a group of remarkable people, and see if they could become something more. See if they could work together when we needed them to fight the battles that we never could. Phil Coulson died still believing in that idea, in Heroes. Fury continues. At his words, Tony stands from his chair, takes one last glance at the bloody cards on the table, and walks out of the room. Fury folds his hands behind his back and looks, regretfully, down at the floor. Well, maybe it was an old-fashioned notion. Fury calls out behind the retreating man. Steve places the card back on the table, rises from his chair, and moves over to pat Fury on the shoulder, before following behind Tony. Watching the two men leave, Fury lets out a tired sigh and turns toward Maria and Brock. Hill, I want you to do everything you can to get our systems back online. Rumlow, you and your men start prepping. I want you all ready for whatever Loki has planned. The two give the man a salute and move to follow his orders. SHIELD Helicarrier. Confinement room. Tony stands alone in the small room, overlooking where the cylindrical glass cage used to be. Gazing around the room, he notices two deep grooves carved into the floor. He raises an eyebrow and bends down to inspect the damaged floor. Tony runs his hands over the deep grooves and noted that they looked kind of like footprints. Was he married? A voice calls out behind him and he turns his head to see Steve standing in the doorway. Huh, Tony questions. Coulson, was he married? Steve asks again. Tony turns his head back towards the floor, sadness and regret plain on his face. Oh, no, there was someone back in Portland, I think. But he never went into much detail. Steve lets out a sorrowful sigh and moves closer to Tony. I'm sorry, he seemed like a good man. He says, but Tony just snorts at his words. He was an idiot, Tony states as he stands up and turns to face Steve. Why? For believing? Steve asks. For trying to take Loki on alone, Tony remarks. Steve shakes his head at his words. He was doing his job. Tony moves closer, bitterness and resentment filling his voice. He was out of his league. He should have waited. He should have. Sometimes there isn't a way out, Tony. But instead of running away, Coulson stepped up. Steve interrupts. Tony lets out another snort at his words. Right, and how'd that work out for him? A moment of silence takes place in the room as the two just stare at each other. It's a soldier's job to be brave and take the risks that no one else can, Steve says, breaking the silence. Anger comes to Tony's face at that and he moves even closer, getting in Steve's face. We are not soldiers. I'm not marching to my death for someone like Fury. He exclaims, but Steve just gives the man a patient look. Neither am I. I know Fury's got the same amount of blood on his hands that Loki does, maybe even more. But right now, we gotta put that behind us and get this mission done. Loki needs a power source. If we can put together a list, maybe we can beat him to it and stop him. Tony just chuckles at Steve's optimism. He turns away from the man and looks back at the damaged room. Why do you think he let us catch him? He wanted to hit us all right where we live. Why? Tony asks. To tear us apart, Steve states. Yeah, divide and conquer is great and all, but he knows he has to take us out to win, right? That's what he wants. He wants to beat us, and he wants to be seen doing it. He wants an audience. Tony explains and Steve nods at his words. So you're saying he wants an encore of what he did in Germany? Steve asks. No, that was just a preview. His next act, that'll be the opening night. And Loki, he's a full-fledged diva. He wants flowers, he wants parades, he wants a monument built to the skies with his name plastered on them. Son of a bitch. Tony snaps his fingers, an idea forming in his head. He turns back around and smiles at Steve. I think I know where he's headed. Shield Helicarrier. STRIKE Team Barracks. The STRIKE team move about the barracks, some doing last-minute weapon checks while others sent out prayers to the Führer that they would survive. Brock stood off to the side, overseeing his men. A blank look was on his face, but inside, rage and indignation riddled his mind. Originally, he planned to just let things play out the way they did in the movie and join the fun later to snatch some power for himself. But Loki's intervention made him alter his plans. Now, he was out for blood. Footsteps sounded behind him and Brock turned to see Steve, dressed in full Captain America gear, walk through the door. Captain Rumlow, time to go, Steve says. Brock gives him an unreadable look. Go where, sir? He questions, playing clueless. I'll tell you on the way. Can your men fly one of those jets? Steve asks. Brock nods. Then suit up, time to get some payback, Steve says. The caption turns to leave as a cold, bloodthirsty smile breaks Brock's emotionless mask. Yes, sir. 2012, New York City, Quinjet. 1 hour later, omniscient POV. The Quinjet flies through the city skyline, heading toward Stark Tower, which is shining a bright blue stream of energy up into the sky. One of Brock's men pilots the jet as Captain America prepares himself for battle in the back. Stark, you have eyes on Loki. Cap asks over his comlink. What took you so long? Did you stop for drive-through? Tony remarks. Thor is keeping him busy right now, but we have other problems. At his words, an explosion goes off in the front of the jet, causing the pilot to make evasive maneuvers. They fly through the smoke and up to Stark Tower as the stream of blue energy in the sky spreads and opens up a huge portal. A horde of aliens flies through the portal and begins wreaking havoc all over the city. Swing by the park, I'm gonna lay him out for you, Tony announces over the radio, and everyone on board watches as Iron Man, in a brand new suit, flies past them at high speed. Iron Man speeds towards the incoming army, shooting repulsor blasts at them as the Chitauri begin to fire back at him. Iron Man fires more blasts as he spins out of the way of their fire, dodging the exploding debris. Light him up, Brock orders, and the pilot pushes a button to release the minigun on the underside of the jet. The minigun begins to spin as the pilot continuously fires at the troop of Chitauri in front of them. A few go down, but the gunfire doesn't even make a dent in the massive army. Iron Man continues to fly through the city before he is suddenly rammed in the back by a Chitauri hovercraft. He loses control for a second, and as he rights himself he releases a barrage of mini-missiles toward the Chitauri, blowing up the hovercraft. The wreckage falls out of the sky as thousands of citizens scatter all over the streets below, some getting out of their taxis and vehicles, and taking out their phones to gawk at the portal in the sky. Most begin to panic and run for their lives as the Chitauri army comes toward them, blowing up cars, buildings, and the streets. Bodies begin to litter the roads as Iron Man flies quickly past the jet, leading a troop of Chitauri behind him. He soars past Stark Tower, where we see Thor and Loki are currently fighting each other on the balcony. The Quinjet comes around the building, shooting at the army who are firing back at them. One of the wings is grazed by Chitauri gunfire and the jet begins to waver as the pilot tries to regain balance. Below, Thor smashes Loki's head into the glass of the catwalk on Stark Tower and Loki spots the smoking jet wavering overhead. He pushes Thor to the floor, then sends out a blast to one of the jet's wings with his scepter, causing it to catch fire. Thor, seeing this, becomes angry and charges at Loki, tackling him as the Quinjet is sent hurtling towards one of the nearby rooftops. Brace for impact. The pilot calls back to the passengers as everyone holds on for their dear lives. The jet grazes the lip of the roof, forcing one of the wings to break off, and scrapes along the rooftop till it comes to a stop on top of the building. Fire, smoke, and sparks of electricity fill the Quinjet as the passengers that survived try to exit the wreck. Everyone out, Cap orders as he grabs his shield from his back and punches a hole in the jet for escape. Cap and Brock make it out of the crash with barely a scratch, but Brock's men weren't so lucky. The pilot's body can be seen laying lifeless through the windshield as the other two soldiers that were on the jet look to be unconscious. We have to get them out of, Cap begins to say but stops, and he quickly puts his shield in front of him as an arrow, that was aimed for his head, bounces off the metal. Cap looks around to find his attacker and sees Hawkeye standing on one of the adjacent buildings, his bow still aimed at him. "Go, I'll handle this," Brock says, and Cap gives him a nod and jumps toward the building Hawkeye was on. Hawkeye, seeing Captain America coming for him, turns and runs as Cap gives chase. New York City, Brock POV. Walking to the edge of the building, I look out towards the once peaceful city to see the chaotic battlefield it has become. Thousands of Chitauri march through the streets, firing their weapons at anything they see. Looking up, I watch as 4 giant armored leviathans in a warship of the Chitauri fly through the portal in the sky. More Chitauri warriors jump from the ships and onto the side of buildings, where they begin to shoot at civilians. "Captain, you okay?" A familiar voice calls over the comlink as another Quinjet flies above me. Inside I see Jack and the rest of my soldiers. "I'm good, don't worry about me and start providing cover fire for the rest." I order. "Copy that," Jack says, and the Quinjet turns and leaves to begin firing at the Chitauri on the other buildings. As I watch the retreating jet, sounds of coughing and gasping ring out behind me, and I turn to see one of my soldiers try to climb his way out of the wrecked Quinjet. I walk over and the soldier weakly reaches his hand out to me, begging for my help. I just look down at the man, an emotionless look on my face. "Dismissed, soldier," my cold voice calls out, and the man looks up at me, confused. I don't say anything else as I send a powerful kick to the hull of the wrecked jet, sending it barreling over the edge of the building, where it crashes into the ground and bursts into a ball of flame. I return to the edge of the building and look down at the chaos. "Time to get to work," I mutter to myself and jump off the edge. As I fall through the sky, wind hitting my face, crimson mist begins to surround me as a black liquid seeps from my skin. The liquid envelops me, forming plates of dark metal that clings to my skin. The liquid crawls over my face and enwraps my head as I hit the streets below, forming a small crater. The Chitauri warriors that were on the ground looked back to see what had just crash landed near them. Through the dust, a pair of glowing crimson eyes stares back at them. Like a predator that just spotted its prey. 2012, New York City. Omniscient POV. The Chitauri warriors, that were marching through the streets, look back to see what had just crash landed near them. A cloud of dust fills the air, and through the cloud, a pair of glowing crimson eyes stares back at them. Like a predator that just spotted its prey. Sensing the aura of danger the eyes gave off, the Chitauri begin to fire at the figure through the dust. Hundreds of bright blue laser blasts fly through the air, passing through the cloud and hitting the figure. A glowing dark metal skull, wearing a brutal smile that leaked crimson energy, peeks its head out of the dust as Brock, ignoring the onslaught of laser fire, emerges fully armored from the cloud. Slowly, he began to march towards the army, his feet sinking a little into the gravel of the street with each heavy step. The Chitauri keep firing upon him, but Brock still doesn't drop, the lasers evaporating as soon as they touch the dark metal of his armor. Seeing that their guns weren't working, the Chitauri warriors stopped firing, and those who held melee weapons stepped up and charged forward to confront the armored man. Using short spear-like energy staves that held a bright blue tip, they began to surround Brock and wildly beat against his armor, some even crawling up on his back to try and penetrate under his helmet. Like savage beasts, they slashed, clawed, and stabbed, but the attacks just landed dully on the dark armor as Brock still seemed to ignore them, his slow marching pace unchanged. As his momentum slowly started to build, a faint dark crimson force field began to emit from the armor. A.k.a. The Chitauri warriors, that were on top of Brock, screeched out in pain as they fell off his body like stunned bugs, their skin shriveling and turning a musky black color. Those who were in front of Brock, hitting him with their staves, looked down in horror as their weapons began to shatter on contact with the eerie force field. The Chitauri, seeing that their attacks were futile, turned around to try and get away from the strange creature. In Chitauran, retreat, retreat, they screeched out to their comrades, trying to warn them of the danger that was now in their midst. Brock's pace began to pick up as he charged after the running Chitauri, steamrolling over the few that were too slow to keep up with the troop. Sounds of bones crunching following wet pops rang out as Brock stepped over their bodies. Brock gained speed as he moved forward into the wave of the Chitauri army, and the dark crimson field that surrounded him began to expand out into a 3-foot dome enwrapping him. Blue blood, blackened flesh, bits of bone, and stray laser fire began to rain down upon his armored figure, which was beginning to blur into the image of a grounded comet ripping through the city. As we looked down upon the battlefield, We could see a path began to form as Brock moved through the congested streets, mounds of broken bodies left behind in his wake. New York City, Stark Tower. A few minutes later, Loki POV. Thor grabs me by my throat and holds me down on the glass floor of the balcony. He gestures over the rail and out to the chaotic scene of my army wreaking havoc over the city below us. Look at this. Look around you. You think this madness will end with your rule? He yells, angrily, as he looks down at me with utter contempt and pity in his eyes. The fool was still trying to save me. Putting on my troubled brother act, I weakly reached out to his hand that was holding my throat. This isn't what I wanted. But it's too late to stop it, I cried. Thor looked down at me with surprise, his eyes turning soft as his grip released a little. No, it's not too late. We can stop it, together. The fool said, heroically. I let a gentle look come to my face as if I was considering his words, as I conjure a knife into my other hand and stab out at Thor. Useless sentiment, I growl as the knife sinks into his arm. Thor grunts at the pain as blood seeps from his arm. He lets go of me for a second and I use the chance to get back to my feet. Thor recovers quickly and, reaching back, he throws Mjolnir at my retreating form. Erg, I groan out as the hammer strikes me hard, sending me rolling off the edge of the building. Wind rushes through my hair as I fall through the sky, only to land on one of the many Chidori hovercrafts that were soaring through the air. Smiling smugly at my luck, I get up and send a mocking wave back to my dear brother, who was staring down angrily from the tower. Thor summons his hammer back to his hand and begins to twirl it around to follow me but is quickly attacked by my other forces. Ha ha ha, maybe I'll see you later at my coronation, dear brother. I yell back at the fool as I take the command seat in the middle of the hovercraft. Glancing down at the battlefield below, my smile spreads further as I see Fury's Captain America cowered down behind a yellow vehicle. My Chidori forces raining laser fire down upon him as he tries to protect himself, a group of wounded civilians, and Barton, who was laid out unconscious next to him. We fly over them and I see the captain look up at me, an angry grimace overtaking his tired face. I wave down playfully at him as a delicious thought forms inside my head. Facing forward, I give the command for the pilot to begin firing down at the many civilians. The turret lets out a soft purr as it spits down lasers at the mortals, who try to run for their lives. Bodies drop around the captain, who is busy blocking the fire from the attacking forces at his front with his shield. A look of horror comes to his face as he glances back, helplessly. Ha 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 ha. I laughed down madly at his suffering and we continued our path soaring above the battlefield. Turning the corner, my laughter fades as I give the order for the pilot to stop the hovercraft. Below, the crushed and broken corpses of my army litter the streets as what looks like a large ball of dark crimson energy hurtled toward our direction. As it comes closer, the ball of energy begins to slow down, leaving 2-foot-sized furrows imprinted into the pavement. I peek down from my seat, curious about what this thing, that was killing my troops, was. The ball slows to a stop and the energy begins to fade, revealing a figure wearing a sleek dark-plated armor that pulsed with crimson power. The helm of the armor formed into the shape of a skull and 2 glowing red eyes looked up at me from the streets. The mouth of the skull twists into a familiar sadistic grin. What is T? I try to speak but a deep, modulated voice interrupts me. I've been looking for you. The armored skull voiced before crouching down like it was going to attack. Kill that thing, I order and the turret hums to life. Blue laser fire showers the thing but it just dismisses it as it leaps toward us from below, the ground breaking away under its legs from the force of the jump. Back you, I tried to order but was too slow. The creature matches our altitude and swats at the hovercraft like it was a ball, the bow of the ship denting inward at its power. Our hovercraft shoots out of the sky and crashes into the wall of the building behind it. 2012, New York City, Loki POV. The creature leaps and matches the altitude of the hovercraft. It reaches back and sends out an armored fist that smacks against the aircraft like it was a ball, making the bow of the ship dent inward at its power and sending it hurtling downwards. Our hovercraft shoots out of the sky, crashing into the brick wall of the office building behind it. The hovercraft collided with the building, landing in a wreck and creating a small crater in the tiled floor of the lobby in the office building. Erog, I wail out as a wave of pain washes over me. A few scraps and small gashes marked my body, but other than that I seemed to have made it out intact. Though I couldn't say the same of my soldiers, who were laying lifelessly next to me. A cloud of dust and debris fills the air as I try and crawl out of the wrecked hovercraft. Cough, cough, I rasp out as I fall out of the damaged aircraft, landing in a heap on the cracked tiled floor. The sound of heavy steps heading towards me rings out as I struggle to get to my feet, waving away the dirty cloud in the air to clear my vision. The heavy steps reach closer as the tall armored skeleton steps through the hole in the wall, its figure silhouetted by the midday sun behind it. "You're not dead yet, are you? Was really hoping you'd put up more of a fight." The creature's deep voice called out to me. It began taking slow, weighted steps toward me as I moved my hand to silently cast a spell behind my back. What quarrel do you have with me, creature?" I questioned, my spell finishing as it came closer. It stopped its march toward me, and tilted its head to the side, the dark skeletal faceplate twisting unnaturally into a perplexed look. Suddenly, its armored right hand snapped up and gripped tightly around the seemingly empty air next to it. "Gagara," I choked out as my projected body faded from existence and my real body shimmered into reality, the scepter in my hand clattering to the floor. The creature held its hand firmly around my throat, making me gasp for air at its powerful grip. I weakly tried to free myself from its hand even as I could feel my blood beginning to rush to my face and I struggled to take in a breath. "This is just sad," its deep, modulated voice remarked as it turned its head towards me. "Will I gain anything from his death?" It questioned seemingly to itself. A disappointed look overtook the faceplate as if it received an answer to its question. "Pity. Was hoping to at least get some new power if I couldn't get a worthy fight." The creature holds me up to its skeletal face and I felt the heat that was coming from the crimson energy that pulsed within like a furnace. It bends down and takes my scepter in its other hand before looking down at my choking form and releasing its grip a bit but still held me by my throat. Air filled my lungs as I took in deep ragged breaths. "Might as well try and have some fun, then," it declared as it held my limp body in front of itself and began charging toward the opposite wall of the building. What are you I tried to question its action, but was interrupted as a faint crimson barrier began to emit from the armor, giving me a burning sensation that I felt in my very being. The creature's momentum began to pick up as it burst through the brick wall easily, using my body like a shield. More pain poured down on me and I screamed for it to stop, but the creature didn't listen, continuing its march through the buildings next to it. New York City. A few miles away. Captain America POV. My shield returns to my hand as the group of attacking Chitauri warriors fall to the ground. Two Chitauri aircrafts come for me above and fire their turrets as I swerve to avoid them, holding my shield out in front of me. Suddenly the aircrafts both explode in the air as I look up to see Iron Man, flying above and sending tiny missiles at the wave of enemies. Iron Man takes a turn and comes up on the overpass, where he knocks a few Chitauri aliens over and lands next to me. Another wave of enemies comes toward us as we both trade knowing looks. I raise my shield to Iron Man, who raises his hand and reflects a repulsor blast off the shield, taking out the surrounding warriors. The troop falls down, their grotesque bodies smoking from the laser fire. A shadow overtakes the streets and I look up to see one of the many giant armored worms flying overhead. On top of it, I see the Hulk fighting off a unit of Chitauri warriors. Thor then lands atop the same creature and begins to take on the warriors with Hulk. The two make quick work of the unit and Hulk breaks a piece of the worm's armor off as Thor summons lightning and drives the piece of metal into its head with his hammer. The creature begins to fall from the sky and crashes to the ground, landing in a few feet away from us. Army tanks and American soldiers begin to arrive at the chaotic scene, and they begin firing at the seemingly endless wave of enemies. Just got a call from Fury. They have a missile headed straight for the city. We have maybe 3 minutes to stop this madness before they wipe it off the map. Tony informs me as he continues to fire at the aliens. "Those cowards," I exclaim in anger. "Any ideas on how to stop it?" Stark doesn't answer for a second, then nods his head. "I'll handle the missile. You get that portal closed. You need something that's strong enough to pierce the barrier around the Tesseract." Tony advises before he takes off in the air. "No, wait Tony," I call out, but the man is already gone. A Chitauri moves to attack my back, but I quickly bash my shield into its head, making it fall to the ground. Thor leaps over toward me and smashes his hammer on the ground, sending arcs of electricity at the enemies. The surrounding Chitauri fall and I move over toward Thor. "We need to close that portal, now," I inform him. Thor nods his head and we begin to move toward Stark Tower, but pause as we hear the echoing sound of fast and heavy footsteps. Boom, The wall of the building near us collapses and a dark crimson ball of energy barrels its way toward our direction. 2012. New York City. Captain America POV. Thor nods his head to my order and we both start to move toward Stark Tower but pause as we hear the rumbling sound of fast and heavy footsteps echoing throughout the space. Boom. Asterisk. The wall of the building near us suddenly collapses outward as a dark crimson ball of energy barrels its way toward our direction. Look out, I yell to Thor as I roll out of the way. But the thunder god did not heed my warning. Instead, he stood his ground and readied his hammer, preparing to hit the oncoming ball of destruction back. The crimson orb continues to charge forward, coming closer as Thor swings his hammer down on it. Ting. Asterisk. The sound of metal striking metal reverberates throughout the city streets, as the metal of the hammer connects with the energy shield. A huge shockwave emits from the contact as Thor is sent flying back, rebounding off the streets and crashing through the wall of another building. 4. I call out to the downed man as I raise my shield in front of me and prepare to defend myself from this new threat. The crimson ball of energy slows a fraction from the hit, bright lightning arcing off of its surface, but didn't seem to be affected by Thor's attack. Speeding past me like a freight train, the crimson orb begins to slow down, 2 deep foot-sized trenches being dug in the concrete of the streets behind it. As the ball comes to a stop, the energy surrounding it begins to dissipate, revealing a figure in sleek ebony-plated armor, crimson energy pulsating from the gaps. In its left hand was a familiar gold spear-like staff, Loki's scepter, while in the other was the broken body of the man himself hanging limply by his throat. What? I question, bewildered by the bizarre scene before me. I take a cautious step back as the armored figure turns around to face me. Its glowing crimson eyes giving off the feeling of pure violence and brutality. I grip the straps of my shield tighter, watching the armored figure for any sudden movements. Sigh, Loki weakly creaks out from the thing's armored hand, signifying he was still alive, if only just barely. The armored figure glances down at the damaged man in its hand as its mouth, surprisingly and unnaturally, open to speak. Quiet, its deep, modulated voice remarks to the broken man, shaking him a little to accentuate its statement. AAAARRRRGGHH. Loki weakly shrieked in pain as his shattered limbs, which were dangling at his sides uselessly, bobbed in the air. The broken bones and ligaments make an unsettling popping sound. Looking at his bloody and busted-up face as he wailed, I wanted to protest this monster's barbaric actions, but remembering all the deaths that Loki caused today and glancing at the devastation around me, I couldn't bring myself to say anything in his defense. I hate to admit it, but some small part of me thought the bastard deserved all the pain he was now feeling. The armored thing ignored Loki's whimpers and looked back up at me. Its arm began to move and I braced myself for an attack, but none came. Instead, it lightly tossed the golden scepter in its left hand to me. Loki's scepter slid on the concrete of the street, coming to a stop at my feet. I glanced back and forth between the armored monster and the scepter, perplexed by what was going on. The monster, seeing my confusion, points up towards Stark Tower and the glowing blue beam on top that was shooting into the sky. Close it, it states simply. Not knowing if this was some kind of trick or scheme, I take a moment to scrutinize the thing in front of me. The aura around it gave me the feeling of something dangerous, but was it really trying to help? Still being cautious and watching it for any sudden moves, I bent down to pick up the scepter. The thing stayed in place as I take the scepter in my hand, noting that the blue glow at its tip was now gone. Straightening back up, I took a second to study the scepter before sending a questioning gaze to the strange armored thing. Why are you helping us? I ask, but it didn't answer and just stares back at me, its crimson eyes giving a blank look. We stood there staring at each other for a short moment before the screaming and sounds of battle in the city echoed out around us. I need to move. The longer I stay here and let this go on, the more civilians become casualties of this chaotic mess. Seeing that I wouldn't get a response from the unnatural figure, I began to slowly back away while still keeping it in my sights. As I gain distance and see that it wasn't trying to move to follow me or attack, I turn around to start heading for Stark Tower. But, pausing in my steps, I turn my head towards the strangely helpful figure. Who are you? I question. The armored figure didn't say anything at first, tilting its skull helm to the side as if it was contemplating something. Assuming that I wouldn't get a reply, I turn back around to continue my trek towards Stark Tower. Crossbones, its deep, modulated voice declared from behind me. I look back over my shoulder to take one last glance at the armored figure and give it a nod of thanks, before rushing toward my destination. New York City. Omniscient POV. As Captain America leaves to close the portal, Brock looks down at the beaten and broken Loki hanging in his grip. He was trying to decide what he should do with him when suddenly a loud crash rings out as Thor leaps from the pile of debris he was under and lands a few feet in front of the armored Brock. An angry look was on his face as a bit of blood dripped from a cut on his head. Thor studied his new opponent for a moment, a little shocked by his appearance, but as he glances down to see a battered Loki hanging by his throat in Brock's hand, his angry scowl dropped further and he raises his hammer to point in provocation at Brock. I don't know what manner of creature you are, but if you don't unhand my brother this instant I'll show you the wrath of an Odinson. Brock couldn't help but smirk at Thor's words, his faceplate twisting on the outside to mimic the action. You know, for someone who claims to be on the side of justice, you sure are overly concerned about this genocidal little bitch. Brock's deep voice remarks. Thor hesitates for a moment, surprised by the creature's words, before replying. He may be a monster, but he is still my brother as well as an Asgardian. He'll be tried by our own people, not you. A deep chuckle sounds out at Thor's words, as Brock laughs mockingly at him. How noble, Brock scoffs. Thor takes a step closer, incensed by this creature's mocking words. Enough talk, release him, now, he orders. Brock tilts his head slightly, irritated at being ordered by this self-righteous idiot. The smirk fades from his faceplate and he stares down Thor with a deadly glare. I'm starting to want you to make me, he states, the challenge clear in his words. Thor, not wasting any more time on conversation, abruptly pulls his hand back and throws his hammer toward Brock, who quickly drops the injured Loki on the ground and crosses his arms in front of him in defense. Ting! Asterisk. The hammer strikes against the dark metal of Brock's armor and sends him sliding back a few feet, before returning to Thor's hand. Thor grips his hammer and runs forward to the downed Loki, quickly checking to see if he was still amongst the living. Blood, broken teeth and bruises marked Loki's face. His limbs were warped at odd angles as the bones in his body seemed to be shattered and a black handprint lined the flesh of his throat, but he was alive. Brother, Thor says softly as he gently touches Loki's forehead. Anger, resentment, pity, and sadness blend openly on his face. But Thor's thoughts were interrupted as an armored boot strikes him straight in the face, sending him tumbling backward over himself. Earth. Thor groans in pain at the powerful kick and tries to get back up on his feet. But Brock, not wanting to let go of the advantage, moves to leap into the air and brings an armored fist down on him. Thor, seeing the oncoming attack, rolls out of the way as the concrete erupts upward, and a small crater forms where he was just laying. He gets back to his feet as Brock straightens himself inside the crater. A lull in the fight takes place as the two stare each other down for a short moment, both acknowledging the other's strength. Above them, we can see Iron Man soaring through the air as he redirects the nuclear missile and guides it through the large portal in the sky. But the two below don't even pay attention to the action. Lighting begins to surround Thor as he readies his hammer and Brock charges forward, a faint crimson force field enwrapping him. They clash and the sounds of metal striking metal ring out throughout the war-torn city, like a blacksmith working the forge. Unbeknownst to the fighting pair, a short burly man with a long mane of messy black hair that reached his back and a full straggly beard on his face watches the battle from atop a building a few miles away. A satisfied smile split his lips, revealing two sharp canines. Found you. The man murmurs quietly to himself. Crimson Cosmos Dimension. Sidorak POV. Ha 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 ha. My laughter rang out around the empty region as I was seated on my throne and watched the boy finally have a worthy fight. I could feel the joy and exultation coming from him and I had to admit, the boy was growing on me. He exceeded all my expectations and exhibited all the qualities of my domain without falling victim to it as those old monks did. Maybe it was time to tell hi. But my thoughts were suddenly interrupted and I sat upright on my throne as I felt familiar black energy resonate in the outside world from close by. I knew this feeling and knew what it meant for the boy. Seems it's time for the wager to truly start. 2012. New York City. Omniscient POV. Moving over the war-torn city we see piles of dead bodies, both human and Chitoran, now litter the once peaceful city of New York. Thanks to the efforts of Brock and the Avengers, most of the Chitauri army has been wiped out, leaving them only left with a couple of healthy battle-ready troops. The few Chitauri warriors who have survived this arduous invasion walk the corpse-laden streets, still trying to complete their futile mission as they search the abandoned roads and wrecked buildings for any more humans to kill. Stray groups of civilians hide amongst themselves in nearby storefronts and office buildings, each hoping that this nightmare was almost over. A small troop of Chidori march through the streets and pass a little coffee shop during their search, but pause in their steps as they see a couple of human heads peeking over the counter to gawk at the marching aliens through the window. Intense fear and panic filled the humans' faces as they could only uselessly watch as the Chidori troop trained their weapons on them, preparing to fire. But, before any laser fire discharged from their guns, the Chidori suddenly tense and look up with concern as a huge shockwave emits from the portal in the sky. Earth. They began to shriek in pain and collapse to the ground one by one as the shockwave reverberated throughout the chaotic city. The few scattered worm-like leviathans above also begin to fall from the sky, their huge armored bodies trampling the buildings underneath. The civilians in the small coffee shop look around them, shocked at the sight of their attackers abruptly dying in front of them. Two of them cautiously get up from behind the cover of the counter and move toward the window to see just what was going on. Through the clouds above, we can see Iron Man begin to fall from the large portal hanging in the sky, the lights of his suit dead, and his body limp as if he was unconscious. As he descended from the air, we look over towards Stark Tower where Captain America can be seen plunging Loki's scepter into the heart of the device holding the Tesseract. The scepter easily pierces through the barrier surrounding the device as the large portal above begins to close rapidly. Moving back, we see Iron Man getting closer and closer to the ground, but before his body could become a bloody mess on the pavement, a large green mass of muscle leaps from a tall rooftop and grabs him out of the air. Wrapping Iron Man under his arm, the two both ram into the side of a building as the Hulk digs his powerful fingers into the walls, sliding down smoothly before crashing to the ground. They did it. They stopped them. We're saved. All the civilians in the small coffee shop cheered in relief as they watched the large portal that loomed over their heads shut close, each feeling lucky that they survived. We should thank. Crash. The civilian abruptly stopped his words and the jubilation in the coffee shop completely died as the back wall suddenly collapsed on itself and a man is sent barreling through the small shop like a wrecking ball. The civilians tried to move out of the way of the man but were too slow as the force of his motion steamrolled over them, shattering their bones and leaving brains, blood, and guts splattered over the shop floor. As they leave this world, the man's momentum doesn't stop as he slams through the front of the shop and crashes into the building across the street, creating a human-sized imprint in the brick wall. We look closer and see that the man is Thor, but his appearance showed nothing of the strong and confident god we knew. Bruises marked his face and body, blood leaked from small gashes, and he was breathing hard like he just ran a marathon around the city. Uorg. Thor groaned in pain as he picks himself out of the debris of the building and tiredly readies his hammer as he gazed fiercely across the street at the hole he was just thrown through. Thor's injured body tensed as the sound of fast and heavy footsteps ring out in the space, just before Brock, clad in full armor, rushes from the hole and charged straight at Thor. Brock didn't look as damaged as Thor, though small cracks could be seen forming in his force field. But these cracks quickly repaired themselves as he charged through the small shop and slammed into Thor. The thunder god swiftly dodged the charge and pointed his hammer to the sky as dark thunderclouds began to appear above. Erg. Thor roared as lightning erupted down from the sky, arcing around him and blasting anything nearby. After a short moment, the lightning dissipates and we see that Brock was flown back a few feet from the attack, more cracks forming on his crimson force field, but other than that he seemed to be fine. Thor grimaced at seeing his attack do nothing as he continued to take in deep breaths, clearly tired from the fight. Brock glanced at the exhausted Thor, the mouth of his faceplate twisting into a vicious grin. "That all you got? 'Cause I can do this all day." His deep, modulated voice called out mockingly. The two stared at one another for a moment before charging at each other and continuing their brutal fight. SHIELD Helicourier. Nick Fury's office. "Sir, systems are back online and I've received reports that the Avengers managed to push Loki's army back and stop the nuclear missile from striking the city." Maria Hill briefs the seated Fury as she stands at attention in front of his desk. A small triumphant smile cracks Fury's weathered face, but dies soon after as he sees a worried look plastered on Hill's face. "What is it?" Fury asks tiredly. One of the techs picked this up off of the few street cams left standing. "You're going to want to see it," Hill says as she hands Fury a small tablet. Fury takes the tablet in his hands and sees a few blurry pictures of a crimson comet tearing through the Chidori. A confused look comes to his face and sends a questioning look toward Hill. Those were captured 20 minutes ago. Scroll down, she explains. Fury does as she asks and scrolls down to see a short video queued up. He pressed play and the blurry scene of Thor fighting some kind of armored skeleton appeared on the small screen. The short video continued to play, Fury watching on with an unreadable look, but the feed was abruptly cut when one of the fighters was thrown into the lamppost, destroying the camera. Fury paused for a moment, reflecting on what he just watched, and placed the tablet down on his desk. He lets out a deep sigh, folds his hands, and looks up at Hill. What was that? Another Asgardian? He questions. Hill shakes her head doubtfully. Judging by the way the two were fighting, I don't think so. It also helped take down a large portion of Loki's forces. She explains. So an unknown third party. Fury states and Maria nods her head. It's strong, too. Thor was selected to be one of the heavy hitters on the team and this thing was going toe-to-toe with him like it was nothing. How long ago was the video taken? He questions. Only a few minutes ago, sir. Fury nods and leans back in his chair to think. After a moment, he sits back up and gives Hill a resolute look. Scramble everyone we have left in the area. I want this thing neutralized, contained, and brought back. He orders. Maria nodded her head at his order, but her eyes displayed a bit of doubt. Can I ask why, sir? The team was just put through hell and we'll be asking them to jump headfirst into another unknown fight. She exclaims. Fury nodded his head at her words, agreeing with the statement. I realize the risks, Agent Hill. But this war has shown us that we're going to need more if something like this happens again, and that thing may come in handy. Hill stayed quiet, still a little uncertain of the order, but saluted Fury all the same. As you say, sir. I will try and get in contact with our forces in the area. She states and turns around to leave the room. As the door closes behind her, Fury stands up, moves towards the window, and looks out at the vast sea below. His face was a blank mask but inside, doubt and apprehension plagued his mind. He didn't know if this was the right course of action or if he was just making a bad situation even worse. After a long moment, a spark of determination returned to his eyes as he steeled his resolve. You never really know. You can only hope for the best, and make do with what you get. He mutters coldly to himself. 2012. New York City. Thor POV. Why won't you just go down? I roared at my opponent as I sent another lightning strike straight toward the skeletal face charging at me. The bright blue lightning surged through the air, but weakly dissipated when it struck against that same damn red barrier surrounding its armored form. Not fazed at all by my attack, the monster closes the distance between us as I pull back with all the strength I had left and send out a powerful strike to bash it from the side with my hammer. Just die, I cursed as Mjolnir struck against the crimson-red barrier. A small shockwave resonated from the contact and my arm shook with strain as I felt the barrier trying to resist the hit and push me back. But I powered through with all my force and, eventually, the shield lost out as my strike shattered it into small translucent ruby-like shards that scattered in the air before fading away. Yes, I exclaim in joy at finally breaking through that damn barrier. My victory was cut short however as the monster, ignoring the fact that its shield was now broken, swiftly swerved past Mjolnir and got in close to send a decisive blow to my chest. As the powerful blow struck me, my armor cracked under the pressure and my breath caught in my lungs as I felt the bones of my ribs indenting under the monster's metal fist. The force behind the punch sent me flying back, my body rebounding off of the pavement, and crashing through two small buildings before smashing into a brick wall of a narrow alleyway and landing in a heap on the dirty ground. Erg, I gasp out in extreme pain as I try to take air into my damaged lungs. A copper taste filled my mouth as blood leaked from my lips and my eyes felt heavy as I sensed the comforting pull of unconsciousness try to take me. The sound of fast and heavy footsteps coming towards me rang out through the area and I forced myself to stay alert. Feebly lifting my head, I saw the figure of the armored monster approaching me from the path I created through the buildings. With great effort, I pulled myself to my feet to meet my opponent head-on. Pain filled my lungs with every breath and my legs shook from the strain, but I pushed all that away and readied Mjolnir at my side. The slowly approaching monster let a brutal smirk come to its skeletal face as it saw my bloody, beaten, and exhausted stance. I gritted my teeth as anger, frustration, and indignation filled me at seeing that creepy smirk. Why did it feel like this thing was getting stronger the more we fight? You look a little worse for wear. This could stop now if you want it to. The monster's deep, modulated voice remarked mockingly. I will never admit defeat. Especially not to some piddling Draugr. I exclaimed as I steeled my resolve to continue this seemingly hopeless battle. New York City. A few minutes later. Brock POV. Exhilaration. That was the only word I could use to describe my current mindset as the bloodied and exhausted Thor tried blocking the glowing armored uppercut I sent his way. Pure and utter exhilaration. My fist breaks through Thor's block and strikes him under his chin, the force of the blow launching him a few feet in the air. I jump to follow him before clasping my hands together and slapping him back to the ground like a volleyball. Thor barrels to the ground, his body cracking through the pavement and creating a small crater. Landing a foot away, I move over to the crater to see an unconscious Thor laying in the middle of the rubble. Pity, I was just starting to have fun and I didn't even get a chance to try. Captain Rumlow. Static. Shield. Static. Ordered. Static. Capture the monster. Static. Do you copy? A familiar voice interrupted my thoughts, as it rang out from the comlink I was still wearing under my helmet. Jack was obviously trying to relay orders back to me, but something must be interfering with the connection. But from what I could gather, unless there was some other unknown superpowered monster roaming the streets, seems like S.H.I.E.L.D. was trying to make me their next priority. As much as I was tempted to stick around and cause more destruction than what I already had, I knew I'd be pushing my luck. I may have beaten him, but the fight with Thor clued me in on the fact that I still had a lot of work to do. If he wasn't already tired from the battle with the Chitauri army and I wasn't able to recoup the destructive energy I used, I don't think I would be the one walking away today. Especially if the other Avengers decided to join in. Seems it's time to go, I mutter quietly to myself as I take one last look at Thor's passed out form before turning around to make my escape. But my steps halt as I suddenly feel a strange sensation begin to overtake me. My heart beats faster and my blood begins to boil as I frantically look around to try to find the source of the strange feeling. You're a hard guy to track down, you know that. A resounding voice calls out to me. My head snaps up to where the voice came from and I saw a homeless man crouched down atop a building. The homeless guy was a short burly man with a long mane of messy black hair that reached his back and a full straggly beard on his face. His clothes were tattered and dirty, and he seemed in dire need of a long shower. Who the fuck are you, posed to be? I question as I brace myself for any sudden attacks. The homeless man doesn't answer as he swiftly leaps off the rooftop like an animal and lands a few feet away from my position. As he got closer, time seemed to slow in the surroundings as the world around us begins to fade from my vision and I abruptly find myself in a pure white void. Hope you are ready, child. A familiar deep booming voice remarks from behind me and I turn around to see Sidorak's giant figure seated on his throne in the white void. I opened my lips to question what was going on, when that same strange feeling struck out in my mind. I snapped my head back to see the homeless man's figure begin to form in the white void, but all my attention was captured by the giant horned beast with raven black fur that materialized behind him. 2012. New York City. Physical. Astral plane. Mental. Brock POV. Hope you are ready, child. A familiar deep booming voice remarks from behind me and I turn around to see Sidorak's giant figure seated on his throne in the white void. I opened my lips to question what was going on when that same strange feeling struck out in my mind. I snap my head back just as the homeless man's figure begins to form on the other side of the ethereal white void. He was smirking cockily at me but I paid him no mind as all my attention was captured by the giant horned beast with raven black fur that materialized behind him. The fuck? I mutter questioningly under my breath. The beast stood as tall as Sidorak on two hoofed feet, its dark inky black fur stood on end and giant claws hung from its long muscular arms that were disproportionate to its body. Two large curved horns lined the beast's head and its huge maw was pulled back, showcasing the long razor-sharp fangs that filled its mouth. Foamy dribble began to drip from its maw and it unleashed a deep rumbling snarl, as its bright yellow eyes locked onto the seated Sidorak behind me with nothing but pure, unadulterated hatred leaking from its gaze. I see you're still clinging to that throne. Old fool, haven't you realized your time has passed? The beast remarked towards Sidorak, its voice sounding croaky and guttural. But its mocking words didn't receive a reply. Glancing back, I noticed that Sidorak just stared back at the giant snarling beast in front of us, unfazed, and with what I presume was a bored look on his helmeted face. But unlike him, the ferocious sensation that the huge beast gave off put me on edge and I began to take a battle-ready stance when I felt something was off. Looking down, I saw that I was no longer in my armor. In fact, I didn't even have a solid form as my body now appeared translucent. Oh, is it time already? Thought it would be at least another 1,000 years before this whole thing started. A flat, hoarse voice suddenly rings throughout the empty void, and I look up just as a fragile old man with gray balding hair and an admittedly impressive gray mustache faded into existence between the homeless man and myself. The old man was sipping something from a coffee mug and wore dark black sunglasses, but, looking closer, his familiar face still stuck out to me. Stan, all right, let's get this thing started. The old man states before an enormous golden magic circle encompassed the entire empty space. I, as the one above all, officially call the first match of the wager of the Octosens into motion. He declared before the space around us began to tremble as the magic circle began to glow brighter. Oh, shit, I cursed quietly as I got the gist of what was happening right now. Sidorak, Farilla, do both parties agree to uphold the terms that were set forth ages ago? At his words, both of the giant beings nodded their heads, neither taking their eyes off the other. Very well, then let your champions present themselves. The old man declares. Immediately the homeless guy stepped forward first, dripping with a swagger reserved for someone cleaner. Andreas Zorba, exemplar to the ruler of the domain of the hunt, Farilla. He introduced. The old man didn't even acknowledge Andreas, he just continued to sip from his mug and waited for me to go next. Taking a step forward, I followed suit with the dirty man facing me. Brock Rumlow, exemplar to Sidorak the Destroyer. I state simply. At my words, the old man sent me a scrutinizing glance that made my skin crawl. It felt like he was peering into my very soul. Then, all of a sudden, the feeling stopped as he turned his eyes away from me and continued the weird ceremony. Now that the introductions are out of the way, let the first match for the Battle of the Octosens begin. Excelsior. As the old man spoke the final word, the magic circle began to spin rapidly as strange golden symbols began to float through the space around us. Abruptly, the white void began to fade from my vision as I was thrown back into the real world. New York City, omniscient POV, returning back to the world outside of the astral plane, we can see the thousands of civilians that occupied the city still reeling from the attack of the Chidori army. Police, firemen, and what was left of the U.S. Army can be seen scampering through the damaged streets of the city, trying to help anyone they found in the wreckage. Suddenly, the ground begins to shudder as the pavement below them starts to crack and split apart. Dark clouds began to fill the sky above as 5 tall golden stone pillars erupt up from the cracking pavement like giant mushrooms. The pillars were spread out over a 5-mile radius around a certain spot in the city, and they began glowing with strange symbols as golden power extended out from them, beginning to form a dome of energy around the single area. The civilians who were watching this phenomenon began to panic and scatter frantically as they tried to get away from the massive pillars, thinking this was another alien attack. As the pillars start to form a dome around the area, we move over to another part of the city, where Captain America, Iron Man, Hulk, and the survivors of the STRIKE team are moving through the devastated city toward the last reported location of Thor and Brock's fight. But they each stop in their tracks, well, everyone except the Hulk, as they see the golden pillars rising from the ground and peeking over the few standing skyscrapers. What is that? Iron Man questions as golden energy spread out from the pillars, creating a wall in front of them. Hulk, wait. Cap tries to warn the green monster as he leaps straight into the dome of energy. Rara! Hulk roars as he collides with the dome and is immediately blown backward a few miles, smashing through buildings before plummeting to the ground far away. The group watched as the Hulk is pushed back, their eyes moving back to the dome as none of them desired to touch the unknown golden energy. Jarvis, can you run a diagnostic to figure out what this thing is and how we can bring it down? Iron Man questions his AI. Sir. Static. Appear. Static. Malfunctioning. The disembodied voice inside Iron Man's suit, which was still damaged from his voyage into the portal, replied. Great. Tony remarks as he takes off his helmet and begins tinkering with it. Captain America glances at Tony before walking over to the glowing dome, standing only a few inches away but being cautious not to touch the golden energy. He squints his eyes to try and peer through the dome, but couldn't glimpse anything from the other side. Is this Loki and the Chidori? Or something else altogether? He mutters quietly to himself as their group stands uselessly outside the dome. Pushing away from them, we move through the golden energy dome to spot a few unlucky civilians who stood trapped on the other side. The civilians stayed a few feet away from the wall of energy, wary of touching it, as the burnt corpses of those who were brave lay at its base. Moving further away, we catch a glimpse of Loki's beaten and broken body still laying unconscious haphazardly in the street where Brock dropped him. Ignoring the passed-out menace, we finally make it to the center of the dome where two men were being thrown back into their physical bodies and preparing to have an all-out death match amongst themselves. 2012, New York City. Within the dome, Brock POV. The white void suddenly vanished from my vision as I was thrown back into the real world. Looking around to get my bearings, I noticed that we were standing in the same area we were in before our involuntary trip. Thor was still passed out behind me, and the homeless man, or Andreas, stood facing me a few feet away. 5 massive pillars could be seen standing above the city's skyline a couple of miles away. Encircling our location as a golden energy dome sealed us inside this sectioned-off part of the city. "I'm not going to go easy on you," Andreas said in a mocking voice, pulling my attention back to the current situation. He leaned his head to both sides as he cracked his neck and stretched before leaning down to the ground in a crouched position, like a beast getting ready to pounce. Long, curved claws began to grow from his fingernails, looking like 10 serrated daggers lined each finger and reminding me of a certain mutant's half-brother. "I mean, no hard feelings. Farrella instructed me to make sure your demise was as painful as possible, to send a message to the big crab on the throne." Not seeing a need to respond, I took a fighting stance as Andreas' muscles tensed and his claws dug into the pavement as he readied himself to attack. I watched the man with caution as I didn't know what I was up against. I had no clue who this guy was. From his patron's domain and the way he carried himself, I could tell his powers had an animalistic base to them, but I didn't know if that was all they entailed or if there was something more to it. My heart beat faster and my blood began to boil as the space around us went quiet for a moment and we prepared ourselves for the oncoming battle. "Ragnar!" Andreas roared, suddenly breaking the silence, and leaping forward toward me, running on all fours. As he came closer and got within my range, I sent out an armored right aimed straight at his head. In a show of excellent agility, Andreas slipped under my punch and got in close, slashing his hands across my chest before twisting around and quickly scurrying back away from me. I looked down at the spot where he attacked, seeing a few faint scratches now marking my armor's surface, but not penetrating through the tough metal. "Damn, that suit of scrap is tougher than I thought it would be," Andreas said as he peered at my armor and then glanced down at his claws. He bent forward again and I figured he was gonna make another charge at me. "Guess I gotta get serious," he voiced, and his entire body began to transform. His muscles began to swell up as his skin shifted, becoming darker. His hair grew out further around him and extended down his shoulders and arms as his teeth elongated into pointed canine-like fangs, and the sharp claws on his fingertips took on a sickly black glow. An enormous muscular half-werewolf-like beast now stood in Andreas's place, staring me down with glowing yellow eyes that looked ravenous and feral. "Can't really control myself in this form, so try not to die too quickly." Andreas barked as he lunged at me once more, his clawed fingers digging deep into the pavement as he ripped chunks of concrete free. But I didn't just stand still and wait for him. As he neared, my arms shot out to block his first strike and I sent a powerful kick toward his side, catching him by surprise and sending him rolling back several yards. The sound of bones breaking rang out through the area and blood dripped to the cold hard ground as Andreas tried to get back to his feet, but his legs couldn't hold his weight and he fell over onto his side. "You talk too much," I remarked and began walking towards the huge beast, who continued to try and get back up. "That it?" I asked as I made it in front of him and watched as he struggled to regain his footing. Andreas's legs pointed at awful angles and part of his ribs was penetrating through his skin. I shook my head and let out a disappointed sigh as I loomed over the overconfident man and raised an armored boot to smash in his skull and end this mediocre fight. But as my foot rushed down toward his head, it only slammed against the concrete as Andreas swiftly rolled out of the way, his legs and ribs popping back into place and his punctured skin quickly stitching back together as he flipped onto his feet. In the blink of an eye, the bestial man lunged at me, his jaws wide open, teeth bared like an animal about to eat its prey. I moved to dodge out of the way, but somehow he still tackled me to the ground and pinned me between his snarling mouth and the asphalt. Shocked by the fact that he had overpowered me, I finally noticed that Andreas' transformation had continued further as he was now a huge wolf-like creature, twice the size of me and covered in thick black fur. His face had completely changed as his nose and mouth elongated, becoming a canine snout that dripped with saliva. "I'm going to rip you apart and eat you from the inside out. You'll feel everything until I've eaten your heart and liver, and then I'll finish you off like a nice juicy steak," Andreas declared, his voice sounding primal and guttural as he flashed the sharp row of fangs that filled his muzzle. His breath smelled like rotting flesh and death, making me want to retch even through my helmet. Before I could react, he bit down on my left arm, forcing his jaws shut tight around my shoulder joint and pinning my limb to the ground. His fangs weren't able to penetrate my armor, but I could feel them scraping off thin pieces of metal from the ebony plates. Using all my strength, I struggled to push him off me as I threw my legs up and kicked him square in his abdomen. The strike forced him to let out a pained gasp and sent him flying off of me. I scrambled to my feet and turned around only to see that Andreas was getting back up. "Get ready to die, bitch." Andreas spat, his yellow eyes glowing and tendrils of black energy leaking from his body as he charged at me. I met his charge, the crimson force field beginning to form around me, as we rammed directly into each other. The two of us collided, but Andreas lost out as he was sent crashing down to the ground. The force of the collision knocked the wind out of him as he coughed violently, spitting out blood and broken fangs. He slowly crawled back to his feet, glaring at me with hatred etched on his snarling snout. An annoyed look passes over my face as I see Andreas's body rapidly begin to heal. "I'm going to make you suffer before I tear you apart and eat you alive." Andreas barked, his voice sounding almost demonic as he stared at me with burning hostility. "You're not going to win. We both know that, so why don't you just give up and offer me your head?" "Like I said," I muttered coldly as I took my fighting stance. "You talk too much." The beast let out a throaty roar at my words and lunged at me on all fours as we both charged at each other once again. New York City, outside the dome, 20 minutes later, omniscient POV. John, I'm standing here in the heart of the city, where the streets of New York have become a war-torn battleground. The army and other first responders are here trying to salvage what they can, but clearly, they still have a long way to go before the city can return to any semblance of what it used to be. A pretty dark-skinned reporter announces as she talks to the camera. She stands outside the police barricade along with a large group of curious civilians and other reporters. In other news, it seems the terror is far from over as some kind of huge dome has sectioned off a part of the city. We've asked officials for any information on what's going on and if this is a part of the alien invasion, but they have declined to respond. Billionaire Tony Stark and his extraordinary companions in the group calling themselves the Avengers have secured the area around the dome and refuse to let anyone near it as they run their tests. But I, like the rest of America, can only speculate what this means for our dear city. Is the nightmare over, or is it just beginning? The cameraman signals the reporter that the broadcast is cut, just as their attention is grabbed by two Quinjet flying above their heads. The jets move past the reporter and the people behind the barricade and lands towards the area where Iron Man, Captain America, Bruce Banner, and a small portion of the STRIKE team are monitoring the zone around the pulsating dome. They each turn their heads as the Quinjet's doors open and a unit of SHIELD agents and scientists step off the aircrafts and begin securing the area and setting up equipment. Nick Fury, followed by Maria Hill, steps off after them and moves over toward the heroes. An annoyed and frustrated look adorned his face. "What's the situation?" he asks as he nears the group. "We're not really sure what we're dealing with yet. We've got 4 different types of readings coming from this thing. EMF, thermal, seismic, and acoustic waves. All of these things point to it surrounding the entire area, and whatever it is, it's impenetrable. We haven't been able to get close enough to determine anything else." Iron Man informs him, "But we're getting closer. I think we should keep moving forward until we find out what this thing is." Bruce chimes in from the side. Fury regards the two geniuses and thinks over their words before making a decision on the current bizarre situation. "I don't want to make a move until we know exactly what we're dealing with. Keep running your test, you have all resources I can afford to offer right now," he declares. The two of them nod and turn to get back to their work. "Let's get to it then," Iron Man states, kind of excited to learn about this new technology before him. They begin walking away from the area and toward the space where the SHIELD scientists are setting up a makeshift lab, while Cap stays behind to talk with Fury. "So what, we're just supposed to sit here and wait for something to happen?" He questions the man, anxious and worried for the civilians trapped within the dome, not to mention Thor. Fury lets out a tired sigh and shakes his head sadly. "For right now, that's all we can do." The two men go silent for a moment, each thinking about their own concerns, before turning their gaze over to the massive golden dome towering near them. Both praying that this day wouldn't get any worse. New York City. Within the dome. Andreas Zorba POV. Fuck. I cursed out in pain as I was sent flying for what felt like the 100th time during this fight. I rolled on the hard pavement as blood and grime caked my fur and my healing factor kicked in, once again repairing my broken bones and stitching my skin back together painfully, but working just a bit slower now. I don't know how much time passed between the 4th and 5th attacks, but it seemed like hours. My arms and legs felt numb, and my mind dulled, but my keen senses heightened as they were the only things carrying me in this fight. Well, that and my healing. My thoughts stopped as my entire body began to tense and my fur stood on end. Listening to my predator sense, my head snapped up just in time to see a large armored figure barreling down on me from above. As if on its own, my body swiftly reacted as I twisted out of the way and crawled to cover just as the armored bastard crashed into my previous potion, the power of his landing destroying the area around him and creating a small crater he was now standing in. Dust and debris flew through the air and I could hear my own heavy panted breathing echoing through the area as I stared furiously at the bastard's skeletal faceplate. His sleek black armor was now painted with blood and viscera from my own body and a few small shallow cuts marked its surface, signifying that I was at least damaging him as much as he broke me. But his eyes, they still shone with bright red crimson energy, showing that he wasn't even close to running out of steam. Shit, why didn't Farrella tell me this guy would put up this much of a fight? With bated breath, I hastily sulk out of my cover and began to stalk around the fucker, hoping to take him by surprise. Using the dust as cover, I managed to get it within 3 feet of him and moved to attack his back. But the attack didn't work out quite in the way I had hoped, as he quickly twisted around, his arms outstretched as if to grab me, and my predator sense sent out blaring alarms that I needed to dodge out of the way. Moving on its own, my body contorted out of his reach, sending me crashing into the ground at his side. I grunted in pain as I rolled away from the attack, but then sprang up immediately after, using the momentum to launch myself back at him. One of us had to die today, and it will not be me. I landed atop the bastard's back and moved my claws to pierce his eyes through his helmet. My predator sense went off for a second, but I ignored it this time as I couldn't wait to hear the fucker's screams of pie. RRRRAA. I roared in agonizing pain as my claws came in contact with the red orbs that made up this bastard's eyes. I quickly tried to pull my hands back, but before I could, he grabbed hold of my arm tightly and yanked me towards him, the pavement below us cracking as he slammed my back against it. Crack. Rog. My spine produced an unsettling sound and I let out an agonizing scream as I heard the bones snap and saw the blood gush from my nostrils. I tried to crawl away and buy some time for my healing factor to kick in, but before I could react, my predator sense informed me of more incoming danger just as a fist was forcefully driven into my jaw, knocking my head against the concrete and cracking open my skull. Blood leaked into my eyes, clouding my vision as I felt a pair of hands reach down and grip my throat. My air supply began to be cut off as I felt fingers dig into my windpipe. The pain was so excruciating that I wanted to scream, but nothing but wet, bloody gurgles came out. The savage surgery continued as the fingers sunk down into my jugular, tearing it open. HMR rag. Miramar. I let out low muffled groans as warm blood flooded into my mouth. The torture wrecked me and I looked up at the bastard who was doing all this to me. The expression in his glowing crimson eyes was blank, but the skull's mouth was twisted into a sadistic smile that sent shivers down my spine. I. Blood gurgle. IGI. Blood gurgle. I tried to surrender, anything to stop the pain, but the bastard ignored me and just continued to dig into my flesh until I could feel his hands wrapping around my spine before crushing it under his grip, and the painful sensations in my body were suddenly gone. I should have been happy when the pain stopped, but my concern and fear plagued my mind at the thought of why it stopped. I can't feel my legs. Or my arms. Is he going to finish me off? Will I die here? I don't want to die. I will not die. I struggled to move my limbs, but there was no movement. I could feel my healing factor trying to piece my body back together, but knew it would be a second before I could function correctly. Till then, the bastard had me completely at his mercy. Wet squelch. Repulsive noises rang out as he pulled his hands from inside my throat, before standing up and walking to the edge of the small crater. Is he not going to kill me? Yes. Don't kill me. Let me live. Just a little longer. Then I'll be sure to return the favor back to you. I cheered inwardly as I watched the bastard climb out of the crater before turning back around and looming over me. Let's see if you can heal from this. His modulated voice stated coldly. The mouth of his faceplate was unlatched wide as the pulsating energy within the suit began to flow upward. I started to drown in sweat as my predator sense tried desperately to warn me of the serious danger I was in. Fiery particles began to build up in his skeletal mouth, forming a small unstable furnace of vibrant crimson energy. No, please don't. Stop, my raspy voice barked out as the feeling in my limbs began to return. Just a little. Rawr. Like a dragon breathing fire, he unleashed the built-up energy and a stream of concentrated fiery energy engulfed my body. It felt like I was being boiled alive as my skin and fur scorched away, revealing the naked tissue underneath. The heat was so intense, I could feel it seeping through my bones and boiling my internal organs. A.a.a.a.r.r.r.r. Ragoth. My heart beat rapidly in my chest, threatening to burst as I fought to stay conscious. Breathing heavily, I tried to withstand the agony, but the pain became too much. I hope you die. I cursed the bastard internally to myself as I felt my muscles being charred away, the damage caused to my body pushing me ever closer to death. And I knew this bastard wouldn't stop until I was dead. Damn it, why did she send me after you first? The bastard's crimson flames were relentless, mercilessly ripping my body apart as it tried, futilely, to repair itself. But the damage was too great, as the flames were burning my very soul. The heat was unbearable and the pain agonizing, but even worse than that, was the fact that there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. I'm sorry, Farrella, I failed yo. Boom. 2012. New York City. Within the dome. Omniscient POV. Boom. Andreas. Body implodes into a cloud of ash as the crimson beam of pure energy Brock was emitting begins to titter off before the flow comes to a complete stop. The stream of crimson power dies as Brock drops to one knee, the output of energy leaving him exhausted. Light scratches marked the surface of his armor and the usual pulsating crimson glow was now as faint as a dying candle. He had used up most of his reserves of destructive energy to put Andreas down for good. As he took a moment to recover, a faint ebony light began to emit from the small crater that now acted as Henry's grave. The sickly ebony glow stretched out and Brock looked up in time to see a large ebony fang float up from the crater. Its tip glowed with an even darker shade of black than normal, which made Brock feel uneasy about it. Before he could say anything or react, a blast of ebony energy exploded from the fang and struck him dead on. Brock was lifted off his feet as the inky black tendril struck him and felt the massive amount of ebony fire burn through him like nothing more than a warm breeze. The runic markings under his armor began to glow brilliantly and crawl further up his arms as power poured into him. His vision went blurry as his mind struggled to overcome the utter feeling of euphoria that he was experiencing. Every fiber of his being was screaming at him to harness all this power and use it to its utmost potential. Now then, the deep booming voice inside of his head said calmly, I think we've seen enough. The power within him became so immense that the very fabric of reality itself seemed to be tearing apart around him. The ground beneath him broke away and he floated up toward the top of the dome like a shooting star. As he reached the top, the radiant color of the golden dome began to shift and warp into a deep crimson hue. A shockwave reverberated throughout the area, shattering every single window of the abandoned buildings within the dome. A crimson beam of light shot out from the center of the dome and sent Brock hurtling back down toward the ground. As he fell, Brock's vision turned black and he lost consciousness, crashing to the ground like a wrecking ball. Boom! Brock smacked against the concrete hard enough to leave a crater in the earth below him, steam trailing off of him as the last vestiges of energy soaked inside of him. He lay there, motionless, as the glow of his runic markings and around his armor faded to nothingness. The plates of his armor began to liquefy and sink back into the markings that now reached up to his shoulders. It has been determined, a voice echoed throughout the space, and to the victor go the spoils. Astral plane, cheater, Farrella bellowed as she pointed her clawed finger at Sidorak, who just looked on with amusement and continued to sit comfortably on his throne. You cheat, you cheat, you cheat, cheater. Farrella's guttural voice continued to screech throughout the white space as she bared her fangs and tensed her muscles like she was going to pounce. Now, that's enough of that, the one above all stated while casually taking a sip from his mug and moving between the two godly beings. Farrella let out a growl but lowered her head as she saw the old man walk across the empty field. She knew that if she tried anything, he would end her existence faster than she could blink. She snarled softly to herself and sent a death glare toward Sidorak as the old man stepped closer, a relaxed expression on his face and a soft smile on his lips. Let us not cause any trouble here today. Sidorak's champion won fair and square. Will you abide by the terms? Or do I need to take action? He asked calmly, the threat clear in his words. Farilla continued to glare at Sidorak for a second longer before she reluctantly lowered her gaze and nodded hesitantly. Very well, Farilla conceded, but remember this yo. Before Farilla could finish her sentence, she was blasted to her knees by a torrent of red energy. Her eyes snapped open as she found herself sprawled out on the floor of a crimson field, surrounded by scorched earth and broken stone. Enough of your trivial words. Submit. Sidorak's booming voice echoed throughout the now crimson-red void as he glared down at the bowing goddess. Farilla scowled at the ancient creature from her lowered position, her rage and irritation seething. She spat a curse at him but brought her hands together, palms facing up as if she was handing something over. I, Farilla of the Hunt, hereby relinquish control of my domain and submit my essence to Sidorak the Destroyer. As Farilla finished speaking, she felt a rush of energy course through her body. Inky black tendrils began to leak from her body and stream toward Sidorak. The tendrils halted in front of him and began to swarm together, distorting the air around them and forming a solid ebony orb that looked like a swirling vortex of darkness. As it should be, Sidorak spoke coldly as he reached out and gripped the orb in his palm. With a flash of black light, the ebony sphere shattered as the energy drifted into him. Farilla felt the connection to her source leave her and disappear completely, making her once majestic form appear shrunken and frail. Her luscious black fur now looks grayed and patchy. RAAAWWGGGGAHH. She howled in pain as the energy seeped from her body before the crimson light eventually faded away, and she once again stood in her own realm, only now she was no longer a godly being but a mere spirit swimming through the empty sea of the universe. She stood sullenly in what was once a luxurious dark forest, but was now an empty dark void. The realization of her situation finally dawned on her. Ha, ha ha, ha 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 ha. Farilla began to laugh crazily as madness took hold of her mind, breaking her beyond repair. Sidorak, New York City, outside the dome. Look, a civilian calls out from the crowd behind the barricade, his hand pointing toward the now dark crimson energy dome. Large cracks began to form in the dome as the energy inside of it grew more unstable. Small pieces of the crimson dome began to fall from its sides and disperse into the surrounding atmosphere. As the dome burst apart, thousands of scattered rubies gliding through the air, the 5 pillars that were looming over the city started to sink back into the ground. As the dome fell, the hundreds of civilians that were trapped on the other side rushed out of the area like a tidal wave, crying and begging for help. Med Unit, take care of those civilians and get them talking. Techs, I want drones in the air surveilling the area. Ground Team, move out and begin securing the perimeter. Security Detail, watch our 6, and avoid contact with anyone else but each other. Nick Fury ordered his men as he walked over to where Tony was working on fixing his suit and Steve was strapping on his cowl. Yes sir, the SHIELD agents stated, and they began moving about the chaotic scene. This is a mess, Nick grumbled as he adjusted his eye patch and gave his cluttered surroundings a quick glance. Well, we can't just leave this place like this, Cap remarked as he grabbed his shield and strapped it to his back. No argument from me, Mr. Stark, just make sure you don't blow up any evidence, Fury added jokingly. Hey, I'm not stupid, Tony replied defensively as the eyes of the helmet he was tinkering with began to power back up. Finally, Tony muttered and placed the helmet over his head. He let out a sigh as the familiar feeling of his AI's voice flooded his ears. Good afternoon, sir, Jarvis greeted him cheerfully. Good to have you back, Jarvis, Tony responded. Everything okay? Quite all right, sir. I have acquired a sizable amount of data from the scene and am currently analyzing it. However, I have encountered several anomalies in the data. Tell me on the way, Tony said as he gave a slight frown and turned his head over to Cap. Ready, always, Cap answered bravely. All right, let's move out, Iron Man exclaimed as took off in the air toward the edge of where the dome had been. Cap charged after him from the ground but moved as fast as a car. Bruce moved to follow the pair but was stopped as Fury placed his hand lightly on his shoulder. Why don't you stay back, Dr. Banner? I think the people have witnessed enough of their city being destroyed for one day, he said, and Bruce glanced over at him for a second before looking around at the injured civilians that were receiving medical aid. He let out a tired sigh before he reluctantly gave Fury a nod and moved over to assist the medics, guilt plain on his face. New York City, Dome Investigation Site, A few minutes later, Captain America and Iron Man made their way through the streets that were now littered with fallen debris. They came to a stop near a row of burned-out cars as they scanned the area with their enhanced vision. They were met with the sight of a young girl who was sitting against the side of a building. She was shivering and appeared to be crying. Captain America quickly walked over to her and kneeled down beside her. "Are you all right, little lady?" Cap asked. I'm fine." The girl whimpered quietly as she continued to look down at the ground. "Do you know what happened here?" Cap asked gently. The girl slowly looked up at Cap and shook her head. I didn't see it, but I heard the explosions and saw the flames." She sniffled and wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her shirt. "My mommy and daddy are still missing." Cap closed his eyes and swallowed hard as he tried to figure out how to comfort the young girl. He glanced up at Iron Man, who was hovering above, scanning around the area. "Don't worry, we're going to find them, okay?" Cap assured the girl. She looked up at him, wiping her face before nodding. "For now, I need you to move to a safer area." "Can you walk?" The girl nodded again and tried to get to her feet. Cap offered her his arm and helped her to her feet. She allowed him to lead her over to the main street, where a few other survivors had gathered. Cap directed them to where the Shield Med station was and told the little girl to follow them. She thanked him and followed the group over to the facility. Captain America shook his head sadly before turning around to continue his search. The pair made their way through the streets and alleyways of the abandoned area until they found themselves outside a dilapidated apartment building. The structure looked like it would collapse at any moment and the windows were broken and boarded up. A bruised and battered Thor sat on the stairs of the building outside the entrance. Loki lay at his feet on the sidewalk, looking in worse shape than his brother. "Thor," Cap called out as he ran over to him. "Captain," Thor replied weakly. "You okay?" Cap asked. "I'll be fine," Thor insisted as he got to his feet, his legs still shaking a little from the powerful blows he received. "What happened?" Cap questioned. "That thing, and I fought. It refused to hand over my brother, so I attacked." Thor sighed. "When I woke up, I was laying in the middle of the street before a huge shockwave sent me flying." "Cap, over there," Iron Man called out as he took off toward the epicenter of the site. Cap looked back at Thor, who gave a nod, and ran after the billionaire. The two heroes came to a stop next to a huge crater that encompassed a block of the city and was covered in a thick layer of black ash. "Whoa," Iron Man exclaimed as he scanned the crater. "This thing's giving off major power spikes, had to be one hell of an explosion." "It looks like an asteroid hit Earth. Or something did," Cap corrected. The pair looked around the crater but spotted nothing but a pair of footprints leading out of it, and stopped at the edge. "Stay here, I will investigate," Iron Man decided and hovered his way out into the crater. He began to scan the area and soon noticed that the black ash that surrounded the crater was composed of elements he didn't even know. He quickly moved over to the center of the crater and searched for anything that could give him answers. "There," Iron Man exclaimed as he spotted what appeared to be a metallic object. He landed his jet boots and approached the object cautiously. It was a thin dark strand of metal, a meter long and curled at the tips. Iron Man grabbed onto the object and yanked it free from the ash and debris. It kept its shape well, with no signs of bending or breaking. He pulled it closer to inspect it, but neither he nor Jarvis could recognize the material. "What the hell happened here?" Tony questioned, uneasiness and tension filling his voice. New York City, underground sewer tunnel. Brock POV. I awoke to the strong smell shit and piss filling my nostrils. My body ached terribly and I felt like lightning was running through my veins. I moved to sit up and my muscles strained to do so. Cold, slimy liquid covered my palms and the back of my arms, and I look around, to realize I was lying beside a brown stream with chunky brown rocks floating in it. Blarg, I retched as the strong smell assaulted my senses again. Recoiling back on the concrete walkway I was sitting on, I moved against the wall and tried to get my bearings. I brought my hands up to my face and gingerly touched my hair. It was matted with filth, as was the rest of my body. A quick glance around revealed that I was in some sort of large tunnel that led further underground. The walls were rough and covered with dirt and grime. "Please don't tell me I'm in a fucking sewer," I muttered disgustedly to myself. My mind replayed images from the previous fight. I recalled the voices and the bright light that illuminated the sky. Then I remembered the moment of impact. "Okay, how'd I get her?" I stopped talking as some kind of tingling feeling resonated throughout my body. I sprang up to my feet and my hand quickly shot out and gripped something in the air. Erg. A soft hollow gasp sounded throughout the tunnel and I looked down at my hand and saw that it was wrapped around something invisible. Show yourself, I called out coldly. The air began to shift around me as I focused on the appendage that I was gripping. A figure faded into existence in front of me. They were wearing an all-white skin-tight tactical armored suit with a hood covering 5 glowing red eyes that lined the faceplate of their helmet. The figure grabbed the hand that was wrapped around their throat and pushed off of me with their feet. Like a ghost, the person phased through my tight grip and flipped back a few feet away. Surprised by their ability, I took a fighting stance and my markings started glowing crimson as I was about to summon my armor. Wait, the figure spoke out in a soft echoey voice, raising their hands in surrender. I'm not your enemy. I paused at their words, but still kept myself at the ready. Who are you? I questioned coldly. The figure slowly reached back to pull down the white hood, then removed the spider-eyed helmet. My eyebrow quirked a little as I stared at the woman before me. She had long curly dark brown hair that fell loosely around her shoulders. Her face was beautiful, with full lips and mocha-shaded skin. But the most striking feature was her eyes. They were shining silver orbs of stormy gray that seemed to reflect through the grimy dark tunnel. My name is Ava Starr, the mysterious stranger introduced herself calmly. And, I want to make a deal with you. A.N. Hey guys. So this arc is finally done, hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for reading. Since the MC had another big power boost in these last couple of chapters, I am going to list some of his new abilities below. Like before, they are separated into 2 sections, unarmored and armored. While wearing the armor, the MC still has access to his other abilities, but when not wearing it he won't have access to the armor's abilities. Changes are marked. Unarmored powers. Superhuman strength able to lift up to 45 tons. Bulletproof skin, medium caliber artillery, at or below 50. Bounces off of him but anything stronger can penetrate his skin. Moderate healing factor, he can heal and regrow limbs rapidly, but any powerful strike to his major organs, like his head or heart, will take him longer to heal. Contaminant immunity, immune to all toxins, poisons, and diseases. Moderate mental resistance. Can see through illusions and sense block an average psychic from trying to read his mind. Danger sense. Can discern numerous factors of a situation, including how much of a threat a foe poses, what move they will make, where they are going, and if these things relate to bringing harm to himself, as well as how to hide without giving away one's presence. Think spider sense mixed with Wolverine, Sabretooth senses. Enhanced tracking, can track others down easily via various means, ranging from sense to footprints, which allows him to follow tracks that are days or even weeks old. Enhanced senses has extremely accurate senses, allowing him to see, hear, smell, taste, and feel better than the peak of his species. Summon armor. Can summon his specialized armor at any time he wants. Question mark, 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 question mark. Armored powers. Self-sustenance, has no need to breathe, eat, or drink. The armor generates weird mystical energies that provide him with the nourishment of sleep, nutrition, hydration, and oxygen. Force field, capable of generating a personal force field around himself, which greatly enhances his physical durability to the level of fending off attacks from Thor. Venomous claws, possesses claws that secrete corruptive destruction energy, which can extend to the victim when the said victim is cut by the claws. Predator aura, can evoke and increase fear and horror in weak-willed individuals, causing the target's brain to release fear-inducing chemicals. The target's perception may be altered, causing them to see their environment as ominous and the user as dark and foreboding, or even as a monster. Mental resistance provides him with complete protection from telepathic attacks and illusions. 360-degree sensory field, able to generate a small 6-foot field that can be used to detect all that occupies it. While in the armor, he can use all of his senses in all directions at once, allowing him to taste, feel, touch, smell, hear, see, etc., omnidirectionally at the same time and react automatically to danger. 2012. New York City. Underground sewer tunnel. Brock POV. My name is Ava Starr, the mysterious stranger introduced herself calmly. And, I want to make a deal with you. I hesitated at her words. A deal? I repeated incredulously. Who was this woman? Ava nodded before the air around her suddenly began to distort and she swiftly put her mask back on. They're searching up there, Ava warned. If we don't keep moving, someone may find us down here. And I'm sure you don't want to be caught anywhere near this site. Where are we exactly? I questioned. We're in the sewer tunnel system that runs underneath Manhattan, Ava explained. This tunnel should lead up to Washington Square Park. I looked the woman over, still cautious of her motives. But why are you helping me? I questioned, confused. Because you have the potential to help me, Ava said simply. Help you how? I asked. Ava let out a hollow sigh at my words. Can we talk about this on the way? I furrowed my brows at her response. This woman knew more about me than I was comfortable with. Plus she had some kind of power that made her untouchable. If you're wondering if you can trust me, I had plenty of chances to report your abilities to Fury, but I didn't. Ava voiced. So she's with S.H.I.E.L.D. Well, at least that's better than the alternative. I took a moment to think over her words and a look of uncertainty crossed my face. I had a lot of questions and a lot of doubts, but I couldn't afford to waste time dealing with her right now. Fine, I conceded with a sigh and lowered my guard, while still keeping my senses peaked for any sudden moves. Thank you, Ava said gratefully. The two of us made our way through the tunnels beneath New York City. From above, the sounds of heavy traffic and distant sirens were audible. Who are you, really? I asked, trying to keep my mind off the fact that I was walking alongside a potential threat. Ava sighed and shook her head. As I said, my name is Ava Starr. I'm a special ops agent for S.H.I.E.L.D., or more specifically Fury. Quote, special ops? I asked skeptically. Yeah, Ava shrugged her shoulders. Spying, assassination, blackmail, any problem that needs to be solved covertly and under the table, I'm the one who does it. She paused for a moment as if remembering something else. And Fury saw you and your team as a problem. Was why I've been watching you for quite some time. She added, almost reluctantly. I frowned at her words, wondering what she meant. Why did he see us as a problem? I questioned to see how much the man knew. Because you're out of his control, Ava explained as she walked through the tunnel. Fury needs to be the one holding all the cards, and you and your team are a variable he didn't expect or want. So why not report me? I asked. Seems like an easy promotion. I thought about it many times, she admitted. But I'm not with S.H.I.E.L.D. for ambition or some idiotic sense of duty and honor. They snatched me up when I was a kid because they saw an opportunity in my powers. Built me this containment suit so I could control my phasing and trained me to be their weapon. Her tone grew darker as she spoke and I could tell that she was recalling some painful memories. They taught me well, Ava continued. I was good at it, too. Until they lost interest in me and my abilities, that is. Her words struck a chord within me. They're always looking for the next big thing, Ava explained. And I just got old news to them. Damn, they didn't even consider adding you to the Avengers? I asked. Ava shook her head. Fury still uses me to do his dirty work. But other than that, nothing. I let out a mental sigh of relief at her words. If she was telling the truth, which I got the feeling she was, that meant she didn't have any strong ties to the organization. That would have been a much bigger concern. Plus, from her tone, I could tell that she didn't seem to have a high opinion of Fury either. If I play this right, I might be able to leverage this situation to my advantage. You said you wanted to make a deal, right? I asked curiously. Ava seemed to relax a bit at my question. I'm sick. My powers are killing me. The stress, the strain it puts on my body, it's too much. They call it molecular disequilibrium, a rather dull name, I think. Doesn't quite do justice to what it does. Every cell in my body is torn apart and stitched back together. Over and over. Every second. Every day. Until I can't do it anymore. I've only got a year left, maybe less. So I need an escape plan. Why come to me? I questioned. Not like I'm a doctor or scientist. I've seen enough of your power. I know what you can do, Ava told me. And I know that you're not afraid to use it to get what you want. You're a dangerous man, Brock Rumlow. I raised an eyebrow at her words but didn't say anything. That's why I want you to help me, Ava pressed. Fury will never allow me to leave or waste resources on curing me. He's satisfied with the current arrangement. And if I die, while that's just another loose end taken care of. That's why I need someone I can trust. Someone strong, and who won't break under pressure. What makes you think you can trust me? I questioned. Ava lightly chuckled under her mask. Because I know you hold no loyalty to S.H.I.E.L.D. You're a spy, she stated matter-of-factly. Figured that much out watching you. I also know you're moving on your own to achieve some kind of separate, personal objective, and that you aren't afraid to get your hands dirty to do so. Well, that's true, at least. And finally, I know that you're working alone, Ava finished. I sighed at her words. She was right, after all. I wasn't used to someone having so much information about my private life. She's missing key details, but her assessment is correct. I've been slacking. I expected to just coast by, picking up power along the way, waiting to show myself at the right time. But I underestimated my enemies. They had a lot of pieces on the board with so many powers that I hadn't even considered. Lucky for me, they still view me as a non-factor, a pawn they could easily take care of. It's time to step things up. I knew I couldn't keep living in the shadows forever. Eventually, Fury or someone worse than him would find out about me. I glanced over at Ava as she walked next to me. So what exactly do you want from me? I asked, trying to move the conversation along. First, Ava began, I want you to help me find a cure for my molecular disequilibrium. I frowned at her words. Are you sure S.H.I.E.L.D. has no cure for this? I questioned. Maybe they lied to you. Ava shook her head adamantly. No way, she insisted. They know I'm dying. They've known since I came into their custody. That's why they created this containment suit. To contain my powers. It's what keeps my condition stable, but just that. So they don't have a cure, I murmured. Ava nodded her head affirmatively. That it? I questioned. Just save your life. Ava chuckled lightly at my casual words. There's one other thing. I want you to help me escape from Fury, she added. Escape? I questioned. Yes, Ava reiterated. He's not the only one in the organization who knows about me. But he's the main obstacle to my freedom. Everyone else, they've either forgotten about me or just doesn't care. But Fury, he's the one who requisitioned this suit to be built. He's the one who orders me to kill. Quote, then why not just kill him? I asked. Should be easy for someone with your powers. He's too influential, Ava explained. Killing him would bring the wrath of S.H.I.E.L.D. and multiple other organizations down on my head. I let out a faint chuckle at her words. I can understand that, I admitted. So what do I get out of this? Here's the deal, Rumlow, Ava began. I want to be set free. I want to be free of Fury and his constant orders to do his dirty work. I want to be rid of this suit. And most importantly, I want to live. I don't have long, and I don't want to spend it in a cell or suffering. I'm tired. Tired of being in pain. Tired of being used. So I guess the question is, what do you want? The tunnel went quiet as I took a moment to think over her words. What do I want? All this time, I've only been focused on surviving whatever came next. Doing whatever I needed to do to stay alive. But I haven't stopped to think about what I want for myself. What do I actually want? Memories of the last 17 years played through my mind. The answer was simple. Freedom. I wanted freedom. True freedom. To stop waiting and hiding. I've been sitting idle for too long. Letting other people determine my fate. Fuck that. S.H.I.E.L.D., Hydra, the Avengers. Fuck 'em all. Time I start to build my own future. But for that to happen, I'll need powerful allies. People who I can trust, or at least as much as someone as messed up as me can. I looked over at Ava and gave her a wolfish smile. In a way, I think we kinda want the same thing. The only difference is, I'm not satisfied with just running away. I want enough power to do whatever the fuck I want when I want to. The lenses of Ava's mask gleamed in surprise. So what do you propose? She asked cautiously. I'll help you, I told her bluntly. But there are conditions. Name them, Ava requested. I'm sure I can accommodate. I smiled again, letting out a low laugh. I want you to join me. 2012, New York City, underground sewer tunnel, Ava star POV. Join you? I questioned while glancing skeptically at the handsome young man beside me. What do you mean by that? Brock made no attempt to hide his amusement from my words. His cold hazel eyes sparkled with delight in the dark tunnel as he studied me. I won't go into my whole backstory, but let's just say you and I are in similar situations, he explained. We're both stuck as tools to be used by our masters. Forced to serve their goals. Both expendable, but neither of us wants to die. So I figure, why not share the burden? Why not stick together and start building a better future for ourselves instead of just surviving? I scowled at his words. I've already dealt with one monster who tried to use me for their own purposes, I reminded him, and I'd like to avoid dealing with another. But Brock simply shrugged and rolled his eyes. Not like you have much choice, he scoffed. The way I see it, you're just going to waste away in that armor until you eventually die. So it's either that or you join me and try to make something more of yourself than just being Fury's weapon. It might feel like you're just trading one master for another, but at least with me, you'll have a chance at making a real life for yourself. I paused for a moment to think over the young man's words. I knew he was right. There were few options available to me. Keep doing what I'm doing until I literally run out of time. Or, join forces with someone new. A man with powerful unknown abilities, who sees things differently than I do. Someone who isn't afraid to get his own hands dirty. Someone who doesn't want to sit idly by and let others determine his fate. I thought carefully about Brock's words before letting out a deep sigh. Fine, I muttered. I don't really know what it is you're after, but if you promise to help find a cure and get me from under Fury's thumb, then I'll help you with whatever you need. Brock smiled at my submission. Then we have a deal? He asked and reached his hand out toward me. I hesitated for a moment, looking at his hand for a long time before finally taking it. Deal, I agreed with a slight grin of my own. Brock grinned back at me and I felt a chill run through me at having made a decision that might change my destiny forever. Whether for better or worse, only time would tell. New York City, underground sewer tunnel. Brock POV. Ava led me further down the tunnel, chatting about some of the missions she was sent on and how her powers worked. I listened intently, curious to hear every detail, but didn't contribute much to the conversation, knowing that I couldn't afford to give away any more information than necessary. When she was done talking, I asked a few questions about her past to make her feel more comfortable around me. She told me about her father, who worked for S.H.I.E.L.D. as a scientist alongside Hank Pym, and how she witnessed the fallout of their partnership, resulting in Pym kicking her father out of S.H.I.E.L.D. and smearing his name within the scientific community. My father tried to continue his research independently, desperate to restore his name. So, he took risks. Too many, until something went wrong. He told us to run. I could tell he was scared. I didn't want him to be alone. When I woke up, my parents were dead. I wasn't so lucky. Ava shivered at the memory and I reached over to put my hand on her shoulder in a comforting gesture. I could feel her stiffen at first, but after a moment she relaxed against my touch and let out an uneasy sigh. Sorry, I murmured. For what? She questioned. I didn't mean to bring up any bad memories, I apologized. Ava slowly nodded her head and glanced over at me. Thanks, she whispered. I appreciate it. I pulled my hand back and kept walking, trying to give her space. So, what happened to you after that? I asked. You said you ran. Ava nodded her head. One of my father's ex-colleagues, Bill Foster, found me and took me into S.H.I.E.L.D. He cared for me like family. But he couldn't protect me from those who saw opportunity in my affliction. The tunnel grew somber for a moment as Ava reflected on her past, and we continued on in silence. The sound of running water and scurrying rats filled my ears as we eventually made our way to a ladder leading up to a manhole cover. This is our exit, Ava informed me. It's supposed to lead to a secluded area of Washington Square Park, but I don't know for sure. Let me go up first and scout around, then I'll knock on the cover to let you know when it's safe. Sounds good, I replied. Ava nodded her head and climbed the ladder first, phasing through the manhole cover above. I waited patiently for a minute, using my enhanced senses to listen out for any commotion above before a soft knock sounded on the metal cover. Hearing the signal, I climb up the ladder and effortlessly move the cover out of the way to reveal the midday sky above. I quickly stepped outside the sewer and scanned the surrounding area. I was standing in a patch of trees to the side of the park where a homeless couple was currently sleeping. Potholes, smashed cars and fallen trees were littered throughout the park. The grassy field empty, except for a small group of people who were queuing up at the entrance, waiting to get to the medical tents which were lined up down the street. As I glanced around the damaged park, I abruptly felt a small vibration throughout my body and turned my head to the side as I sensed Ava's invisible form move beside me. The air around her shifted as she faded into view. So, what now? She asked. I took a moment to think it over. Currently, my main goal is to get from under both S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra's thumb while snatching as much information, resources, and power as I can get. With the side objective of finding a cure for Ava and securing her complete loyalty. But after that, what is my purpose? Truthfully, I had no idea. I've been in this universe for so long, but I never really thought about what I wanted to do with this new life. Until now. Sure, there were some old scores I had to settle. Dr. Whitehall, Taskmaster. But after that, I shook my head and let out a tired sigh, deciding to think about my plans later. Right now, I should focus on completing this first goal before I start thinking deeply about my purpose in life. Now, you go back to Fury and give your report. I'm sure I don't need to remind you to keep certain things under wraps. I look over at Ava, who gives a nod. After that, I'll meet you back at SHIELD HQ and we can figure out a way to cure you. Sound good? Ava nodded at my words. Sounds good, Captain, she said questioningly. I stared hard at her for a moment before letting out a slow exhale. Let's just call me Brock, I told her. For now. Ava nodded her head in agreement. All right, Brock, but what do you plan on doing? She asked. I gave her a long pause before replying. I have to go grab the rest of my spoils. 2012, New York City, SHIELD headquarters, conference room. One day later, omniscient POV, Crossbones, Nick Fury questioned as he looked across the table at the people sitting opposite him. Steve, Tony, Bruce, and Clint all sat solemnly at the conference table, each wearing expressions of intense worry and concern. Maria Hill, whose expression was hard to read, stood behind them. A sizable holographic picture floated above the table, showing the reconstructed image of a figure wearing sleek ebony black armor that glowed with a blood-red hue and a horrifying skull helmet masking their face. Yeah, that's what he called himself, Steve informed Fury. He's the one who took care of Loki and gave me his scepter to close the portal. Fury frowned at the information. Well, that's certainly interesting. Fury muttered. But why would this, Crossbones, do that? I don't know, Steve admitted, but the truth of the matter is that he did save us. Without him, we wouldn't have gotten that portal closed in time. And without that, Loki would have come back with an army and killed us all. He saved our lives. I don't know if he had some plan beyond that, but we should at least give him the benefit of the doubt. Fury paused for a moment before nodding his head and leaning forward, resting his elbows on the table. We'll be keeping an eye out for him, Fury told them. But I'm not sure if we'll be able to do much else at this point. After the battle, he seems to have disappeared in the wind. If he turns up again, we'll deal with him accordingly. Tony and Clint nodded their heads in agreement. Steve simply rested his chin on his palm as he stared at the holographic projection of Crossbones. Wondering if this mysterious person was a friend or foe. That's fine, he told Fury. Just make sure you keep the rest of us updated if anything happens. I'll try, Fury nodded his head. The hologram of Crossbones faded away and the room fell silent. So, what happens now? Clint asked. Fury sighed. Right now, we recover. After that, we'll gather the rest of the team and discuss what we want to do next. But until then, I suggest you all take a break. Everyone but Steve was happy to hear those words and nodded their heads in agreement. They left the conference room and headed back to their respective quarters, leaving Fury alone with Maria. Maria frowned at Fury and leaned down to whisper into his ear. Sir, Secretary Pierce's chopper is on its way here now, Maria informed him. He will arrive shortly. Fury nodded his head and motioned for Maria to leave the room. After she left, he took a deep breath and sat back in his chair. All right, he began. Let's see what he has to say. New York City, SHIELD headquarters, STRIKE team barracks. Captain's quarters. A few minutes later, Brock lay on his bed in the cramped room, staring up at a small blue orb he held in his hand. Looking closer at the small blue orb, one could see a familiar smooth yellow gemstone floating inside the orb's center. The Mind Stone. So, how exactly am I supposed to use this thing? Brock asked aloud but received no answer. Sidorak hadn't spoken to him since he won the fight against Andreas. He could still feel the god's presence within himself, but for some reason, he wasn't answering any of his calls. Brock let out a sigh and clenched his fist around the orb in his palm. He felt like he was missing something important, but he couldn't put his finger on what it was. Brock shook his head and lay back down on the bed, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath. Knock, knock. The sound of rapid knocking interrupted his thoughts as Brock slowly opened his eyes and looked over to the door. Pocketing the orb, Brock let out another sigh as he sat up and grabbed his discarded uniform from the floor, slipping on his pants and shirt in the process. He slowly walked over to the door and unlocked the handle, opening it to reveal Jasper Sidwell's weaselly face standing outside of his quarters. What do you want? Brock grumbled at the small man. Sidwell gave a smug grin and stepped closer to the door. Secretary Pierce has arrived at the base, he informed him, and he wishes to speak with you. Well, I suppose I can spare a few moments, Brock shrugged, closing the door to his quarters behind himself and shouldering past the small man. Sidwell grumbled something under his breath as he followed Brock down the hallways and into the elevator that led up to the office that was reserved for the Undersecretary of the World Security Council, Alexander Pierce. Once they reached the top floor, Brock and Sidwell exited the elevator and stopped at the reception desk. "Good morning, sirs," a young, attractive woman greeted them with a smile. Brock nodded his head politely at the girl while Sidwell just glared at her. "Morning," Brock told her. The receptionist nodded her head in response and gestured for the two men to follow her. She led them through the door to the office where Secretary Pierce was patiently waiting. Sitting behind the large oak desk, Pierce looked up from his work as the doors opened and smiled at them both with a warm greeting. "Hello, Agent Sidwell," Pierce greeted him. "How are you today?" Sidwell stood at attention in front of the desk, giving a slight salute with his right hand. "I'm fine, sir. And may I say it's always an honor to see you, sir," he replied flatteringly. Pierce chuckled slightly and waved aside the comment. "Please, Sidwell, I'm the president's top advisor, not some military officer," Pierce told him with a chuckle. "No need for the formalities." "Yes, sir," Sidwell bowed his head in respect. "I apologize, sir." Pierce nodded his head and turned to look at Brock, who stood off to the side in parade rest. "And how are you today, Captain Rumlow?" he asked. "Fine, sir," Brock answered calmly. "Thank you. Excellent. I hope you and your team were able to get some rest last night," Pierce said. "You boys had quite the big day yesterday." Brock nodded his head silently in agreement. "Yes, sir," he responded. "First, I would like to congratulate you and your men on a job well done yesterday," Pierce continued. "Your actions allowed us to secure a significant victory against Loki." Brock nodded his head in thanks. "Which is why I am promoting you to Major," Pierce said. "I'm sure you were already expecting that, but I wanted to inform you officially anyway." "It's an honor, sir," Brock thanked him. "Please, it's nothing. You deserve it. You're the best of the best. The only problem we seem to have is trying to find enough jobs for the team to do." Pierce shook his head. "Which brings me to the next piece of business." Pierce presses a button underneath his desk, securing the room of any unwanted ears. "My apologies for bringing this up so late, but the President's Security Council has decided to schedule a meeting for tomorrow morning. It will consist of representatives from the United Nations, the World Security Council, and other government officials. They'll be discussing the events of recent days and what we plan to do moving forward. I've been ordered by the President to represent S.H.I.E.L.D. in this gathering." Brock cocked his head slightly as he listened attentively. "I want you and your team to act as my personal escort to the meeting," Pierce told him. "I also need you to make sure everyone behaves themselves and that there aren't any incidents during this gathering. There are important moves that need to be made in this meeting." "Understood," Brock nodded his head. "I'll make sure everything goes according to plan. Can I ask what exactly is going to be discussed?" Pierce sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Honestly, I'm not entirely sure myself," he admitted. "But the President has told me that some decisions need to be made concerning Loki's imprisonment. He believes that Loki might try to escape at some point. So he's ordered me to prepare a game plan for a worst-case scenario situation." Brock pondered for a moment. "I think I understand. We'll take every precaution necessary to make sure the meeting is not interrupted, sir." "Of course," Pierce nodded his head. "Thank you, Major Rumlow. The cause appreciates your service." "Hail Hydra, hail Hydra," Brock replied. With that, Pierce dismissed Brock and Sidwell from his presence and they returned to the elevator and headed back downstairs. Back in the main lobby, Sidwell broke out into a smug grin and clapped Brock on the shoulder as he passed by. "Congratulations, boy," he said with a fake smile. Brock just grunted in reply, pushing his hand off of his shoulder. Sidwell grimaced and then left as Brock took a deep breath and exhaled in relief. After a brief respite, he sensed someone approaching behind him. "How did the meeting go?" Ava's ghostly voice asked. Brock nodded his head, not turning around to face her. "Went smoothly," he told her. "Got a promotion and new orders." "I see," Ava replied. "Anything I can help with?" Brock shook his head. "No, I think I got this handled," he assured her. "You keep poking around for information on your cure." "Very well," she agreed. "I'll stay in touch." Ava's invisible form reached forward and slipped a stolen comlink into Brock's hand before she vanished back into the shadows of the base. Brock pocketed the small device and smiled to himself. "It's nice to have good help," he whispered. 2012, Washington, D.C., Capitol Hill. One day later, omniscient POV. The sun had begun to set over Washington, D.C. as senators and members of the United Nations Security Council all moved to gather together in the Capitol building. Many nations were represented amongst the group, including America, Russia, China, Britain, France, India, Canada, and many others. Multiple members of private security, STRIKE, and the Secret Service were stationed around the perimeter, ensuring each representative remained in place and didn't try to interrupt the proceedings. Alexander Pierce stood comfortably in the center of the large entryway, greeting the various representatives as they entered the room. Brock was standing quietly behind him, dressed in his typical black shield military uniform and an M4A1 carbine rifle strapped firmly to his back, as he eyed the people filing through the double doors that lead into the building. "Nice to see you again, Senator Stevick," Pierce greeted a short obese man with a sweaty bald head who arrived with the last trickle of other members of the Senate. "Secretary Pierce," the man exclaimed as he shuffled up and reached out his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you at last. I've heard so much about you from my colleagues." Pierce smiled and shook the man's hand. As the two shook hands, Brock's eyebrow quirked as he spotted a familiar blonde-haired young man standing beside the senator. "This is my aide, Werner von Strucker," Senator Stevick introduced the young man, who gave a professional smile and reached a hand out towards Pierce. "Pleasure to meet you, sir," he said, shaking Pierce's hand. "I admire the work you've done." "Likewise," Pierce chuckled. "I hope you'll continue to fight the good fight, young man." "Of course, sir," Werner said, and the two locked eyes for a split second before Pierce let go, then gestured towards the inside. "Come, let's get started." Brock watched as the trio passed by, he and Werner sharing a glance before they made their way into the Capitol building. He felt a little bit of irritation boil within him at seeing von Strucker again, but kept it hidden from view as he followed after them. The large double doors close, leaving Brock outside to stand guard alone in silence with the rest of the security. We move inside the building to the Senate Hall, where Pierce takes his place at the podium and looks out at the assembly. The room is filled with tension, as each nation awaits to hear the outcome of this meeting with bated breath. "Thank you all for coming," Pierce begins. "As you may know, we are gathered here today to discuss the recent events surrounding Loki's invasion of our planet." Pierce pauses for a moment and looks around the room, nodding slowly. "If you haven't heard yet, after Loki's army was defeated, he was taken into custody by the Asgardians. We've been told he has now been sentenced to serve life in their prison. However," Pierce continues without missing a beat, "his sentence doesn't mean we're safe from any other threat that may turn their attention to us. This meeting aims to determine what steps we should take moving forward." Pierce takes a pause and scans the crowd once more, getting a sense of their reactions. "I would like to propose that we begin discussing what kind of response we will take if another invasion occurs and what kind of force we need to maintain peace and stability on Earth." There is a general murmur of confusion amongst the assembly. "Is that really necessary?" A German ambassador asks. "Why isn't it enough to simply imprison Loki?" "Because," Pierce replies, "Loki's incarceration is merely a temporary measure. As long as he is alive, the danger will remain. We must consider what we will do in the event Loki escapes or, worse yet, is released. After all, his jailers are his family. What happens when he returns to Earth? How can we stop him?" Some of the diplomats nod their heads in agreement. "That's a fair point," another diplomat says. "What do you suggest we do?" Pierce takes a moment before speaking. "Well, I believe we should first establish a contingency plan." "A contingency plan?" a French diplomat asks. "What does that mean?" Pierce nods his head and the huge projector behind him comes to life, showing several different blueprints on the screen. Project Insight. It's a project that S.H.I.E.L.D. has been working on for some time now that will allow us to monitor every corner of the world with satellite surveillance. With this project, we would be able to patrol Earth and, with the use of an algorithm that can evaluate an individual's behavior, eliminate anything that can possibly pose a potential threat. If Loki ever returns to Earth, there will be no hiding from us. With Project Insight, we'll know immediately if he's escaped or if he's even on the planet. More murmurs fill the air. "So you're suggesting we entrust the world's safety around this technology?" One member of the assembly questions. "Are you serious?" "Yes," Pierce replies. "I am." The room grows silent as the members of the assembly take in what Pierce is proposing. "I think you're overestimating how powerful this technology is," an Indian diplomat points out. "I don't think it's wise to invest so heavily in something so expensive. We'd be better off investing our resources into building a military force that can stand up to Loki's army." What if we're too late? Senator Stevick stands to speak up and the rest of the room goes quiet, showing how much sway he held. We don't know what we're up against or what they can even do. We lack information, and that could cost us dearly. And that's why we must act quickly. We must be prepared for anything, Pierce reminds the crowd, which falls silent once again. I'm afraid I must agree with Secretary Pierce and Senator Stevick. Ambassador Golog from Latveria speaks up. Perhaps we should focus more on preparing ourselves for the worst-case scenario. That way, if Loki ever returns to Earth, we can be ready to respond. Otherwise, we run the risk of being caught unprepared. The room begins to grow tense as whispers break out among the ambassadors. I'm afraid I have to agree with Ambassador Golog, a British ambassador adds. There is a great deal of potential in Project Insight. Again, murmurs fill the air and the tension grows thick as the members of the assembly debate. Pierce stands confidently at the podium, a small smile playing on his lips as he watches as the discussion begins to turn in his favor. Washington, D.C., Capitol Hill. Outside the meeting, Brock POV. I stood on the steps of the Capitol building, looking out at the assembled masses of reporters and civilians behind the barricade below and casually scanning for anyone suspicious. As I scanned the area, I noticed several dark figures walking briskly through the crowd and heading toward the front of the barricade. Jack, I called over next to me. Yes, Major, Jack replied. We got multiple suspicious individuals approaching the perimeter, I told him and pointed the people out. Check them out, copy that, he replied. On it, I'll keep an eye on things here, I told Jack. Keep me updated. Will do, sir, he replied. The comlink went quiet again as I watched my men begin to move on to the new threats, who gently pushed their way through the crowd, not quite blending in, but certainly not standing out either. As my team began to single them out, I turned to see if there were any other possible threats lurking nearby. Abruptly, my heightened gaze was drawn to a glare of light coming from atop a building a few yards away. I narrowed my eyes and looked up as the figure of a sniper squatting on the roof came into view. Letting out a sigh, I unslung the M4A1 from my back, took aim at the man, and adjusted my rifle's scope. Jack, I called out over the comlink. I got a sniper about 500 yards out. When I take him down, I want you to arrest the people I pointed out. ETA 5 seconds. Copy that, Jack replied. I continued staring at the sniper, who was just sitting there, waiting. He was just staring into space, I'm not even at his scope. 5, 4, 3. I counted silently under my breath. I sighted carefully between his eyes. 2. I pulled the trigger. Bang. Asterisk. 2012. Washington, D.C. Capitol Hill. Brock POV. Bang. Asterisk. The bullet whizzed through the air, slamming straight into the sniper's right eye, and blowing a path clean through his skull. The sniper fell backward, blood pouring from his ruined eye socket as he fell off of the building and tumbled to the ground below. Cries of panic and surprise from the crowd washed over me as I lowered my gun and watched the sniper fall with indifferent eyes. I glanced over as Jack and the rest of my guys make their move and arrest the suspects. Move 'em along, boys. Jack shouted, slapping handcuffs onto the suspects and moving them away from the barricade. With the sniper dealt with, I slung my weapon over my shoulder and walked over to Jack. All right, I said to him. Looks like that part is over. Secure the prisoners and get them ready for transport. Sure thing, sir, Jack said as he stepped forward and grabbed one of the men by the arm. The man tried to resist but Jack just gripped tighter on the man's arm, holding him in place. Let's go, he said, leading the prisoner away. I walked back up the stairs of the Capitol building, making sure to keep an eye on the panicked crowd as I went inside to report the incident. Washington, D.C., Capitol Hill. Inside the meeting, Alexander Pierce POV. The votes are in. There is a 3-2 majority in favor of Project Insight, I announced to the assembly. With that, we'll reconvene tomorrow morning for the vote on funding. Thank you all for your time and patience. At my words, the assembly disperses and I step down from the podium, shaking hands and thanking a few members of the delegation as they exit the hall. I thought you were going to lose, Councilman Chow Yen commented as he approached me. I'm sure you did, I replied with a mocking smile. But I still won. You did. Councilman Yen smiled fakely and shook my hand firmly. Congratulations. Thank you very much, I say with derisive politeness. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to return and prepare myself for tomorrow's vote. Of course, Councilman Yen says before walking off, leaving me alone in the conference hall. I watch him leave for a moment, then turn and head for the main doors. I reach out and push them open just as Major Rumlow strides up to the doors. He stops short when he sees me standing there. "Major," I greet him as he turns around. "Sir," he responds, saluting me. "We had a small situation outside." I raise an eyebrow at that remark. "Ah, what happened?" I caught sight of multiple suspicious individuals trying to break through the perimeter as well as a sniper stationed out front. But I took care of it. The sniper was put down and the suspects are in custody and are currently being readied for transport to an off-site location. No injuries on our side. My eyes widen slightly at the report. "Interesting, have you interrogated them yet?" Rumlow shakes his head. "No, sir. I reported to you as soon as the situation was taken care of." I nod my head in understanding. "Well done. Take me to where the prisoners are to be held," I order. "I want to be there for the questioning." "Yes, sir," Rumlow says respectfully. He leads me down the stairs, past the barricades, and into the streets surrounding the Capitol building. We walk for a minute before we come across a group of black SUVs parked in a tight line. "Is everything ready?" Rumlow asks a plain-looking soldier who stood beside the vehicles. "Yes, sir," he says after glancing at me for a moment. "We're ready to move out." "Good," Rumlow says. "Then let's go." "Yes, sir," he replies. Rumlow walks up to one of the SUVs, opens its rear door, and motions for me to step inside. I follow suit, sitting down on the bench seat as he climbs in next to me and closes the door behind him. "All right," I say as I buckle myself in. "Let's find out what these people have to say about their little plan." The line vehicles lurch forward as the convoy begins to roll down the street and away from the Capitol building. I look out the window at the various civilians who stare at us curiously, unsure of what was happening. "Any theories on what these people were after?" I ask Rumlow. "They were probably trying to assassinate someone from the delegation," he says. "Or perhaps they wanted to steal intel on what was talked about during the meeting. Either way, they've failed." Rumlow replies calmly. I hum noncommittally, mulling over his suggestion. "At any rate, we'll know soon enough," he continues. "Indeed," I nod. We stay silent for a few minutes, lost in our own thoughts as the convoy rolls onward. Eventually, though, I can't help but continue to wonder. Who could these people have been trying to kill? And why would they try to attack the assembly? Did they know about the project? Or who we really were? Whatever the case, whoever they were working with will pay for their actions. I doubt they were acting alone. As I continue to ponder the situation, I feel a soft tap on my shoulder and look over at the capable young man next to me. "Sir," he says quietly. "We've arrived." I look out the window and see that we've reached the secure location where the prisoners are to be questioned. Let's see what these scum know. Trigger warning: this next scene includes torture. If you know you can't handle that, skip to the end of the chapter. Washington, D.C. Secure black site. Brock POV. The interrogation site was in a dim and humid converted warehouse with a sectioned-off viewing room behind a one-way mirror that displayed 4 metal operating tables lined up in a row in the middle of the room. A small digital clock hangs on the wall opposite the entrance, which is guarded by a pair of soldiers wearing body armor and carrying assault rifles. A long table holding various torture equipment stood off to the side, a standard setup, nothing special or fancy. I pull out a chair and sit down as I watch my men strap the prisoners down on the operating tables, their arms outstretched above them, secured to the tables with thick bands of iron. "All right," I say as I stand up. "Let's begin." Moving over to the equipment table, I look it over before grabbing a small vicious-looking electric handsaw and walking over to the first prisoner. "This might hurt," I tell him before turning the power switch on the handle to activate it. The sound of the blades buzzing fills the room as they spin to life. "Just relax," I say calmly to the prisoner. "It should only take a few minutes for me to cut your fingers off." "Fuck you," he spits bitterly, glaring at me defiantly. I smile at him. That's the spirit. I grab the saw and bring it down hard against the top knuckle of his pinky finger. The blade slices through the skin and flesh easily, causing a gasp of pain to escape from the prisoner's mouth. Blood spurts from the wound, spraying all over the table. As his pinky falls to the floor, I move to the next one and keep going until both his hands were reduced to bloody nubs. "Who sent you?" I demand calmly as the man just groans in pain as more blood erupts from the severed appendages, splattering across the table. He lets out another cry of anguish as he tries, hopelessly, to stop the bleeding. I press the bloody tip of the blade against the prisoner's wrist. The blade digs deep into his flesh and I twist the handle, severing the vein and artery in his wrist, causing him to scream in agony. Tell me who sent you. I shout at him, pressing harder on the blade. Fuck yo. Blood pours forth from the wound and he screams louder before he finally falls victim to the blood loss and loses consciousness. I release the blade when the screaming ceases, wiping some of the blood from my hands. I grab a scalpel and slice a deep line across his throat, ending his life. The other 3 prisoners wail in pain, their faces contorted in agony. I move over to the next one in line. What's your name? I ask calmly. M. Mason, he whispers weakly after a moment. Nice to meet you, Mason, I reply as I grab a pair of pliers. You want to tell me what you guys were doing in Capitol Hill and who put you up to it? I ask the nervous prisoner. I don't know anything. He stammers, gripping the table tightly. That's too bad, I reply with a sigh before grabbing his face. Maybe this will jog your memory. I grip the front of the man's head and tighten the pliers directly underneath his eyelids. They bite into the flesh of his eyelid, cutting through it and pinching it between the 2 metal prongs. The man writhes in pain, screaming in agony as he tries to close his eyes, but the pliers keep them pinned tightly within the sockets. Blood wells up from his eyeball as it bleeds out from under the pliers. His screams become more frantic and hysterical as blood starts pouring from his eye socket, dripping down onto the table. What do you want from me? Just let me go, please, he begs me as I keep squeezing the pliers and he continues to bleed out. Oops, I chuckle as I hear the faint sound of tearing flesh. Please, he yells in a wild voice as blood squirts from his eye socket. Fucking stop, sorry buddy, I reply calmly before jamming the tip of the pliers deeper into the eye, ripping the eyeball free of its socket. No, he shrieks hysterically and thrashes violently on the table. I hold the eyeball up to my eye and inspect it closely as I listen to him scream in agony. It's a strange color, almost brownish red, and feels sticky to my touch. Should be happy I got it all in one go, I chuckle as I toss the eyeball aside. Now, who sent you? I don't know, he whimpers, still struggling on the table. I swear I don't fucking know. I nod at him and step back. Alright then. The man's bruised face brightens at my words and he lets out a sigh of relief, thinking I believed him. Hold still, I order as I gripped his jaw in my hand and forced his mouth open. Once again, he struggles against me, kicking his legs frantically against his restraints as he tries to get away from me. He growls angrily at me like a beast as I stick the pliers down his throat and tighten the prongs around his tongue. His screams intensify as he starts choking on the small tool. His eyes bulge as he attempts to spit the pliers from his mouth but they won't budge. With little effort, I yank my hand backwards so hard that the pliers rip out his tongue. The man's eyes go wide with shock as blood begins to erupt from his mouth and he stares at me in horror. He starts to choke on his own blood as I step back and retrieve a thin metal hook from the table. I turn to the next captive and grab his hair. He flails his head wildly, trying desperately to break free of my grasp, but I'm too strong for him. Who? Friends of humanity. We're with the friends of humanity. The man shouts as he fights against me. Who? I question coldly while releasing his hair from my hand. We're a revolutionary organization dedicated to freeing humanity from the shackles of oppression and shielding humans from the crimes perpetrated by recent non-human threats, the man cries out as he thrashes helplessly on the operating table. We take orders directly from Senator Peter Crane. He's the leader. 2012. Washington, D.C. Secure Black Site. Brock POV. We're a revolutionary organization dedicated to freeing humanity from the shackles of oppression perpetrated by recent non-human threats, the man cries out as he thrashes helplessly on the operating table. We take orders directly from Senator Peter Crane. He's the leader. At his words, I glance back at the one-way mirror behind me, where Pierce was undoubtedly listening, before returning my gaze back to the nervous prisoner. Why did you try to attack the assembly? I ask, my tone utterly calm as I study him closely. We were tasked to kidnap high-ranking officials who didn't represent human interests in Congress, and send a message with their deaths. The man yells. And what was that message supposed to be? I ask. The end of all non-human tyranny. The man shouts as he kicks his feet against the restraining straps. They attacked our planet, destroyed our city, tried to enslave our people, and how do the people in power respond? With indifference. They just sat there and let it happen. Even made secret deals with the freaks. He shouts furiously. So we decided we need to show them how serious we are about this. We needed to prove we mean business. The man's rant causes me to pause for a moment. He sounds awfully passionate about his beliefs, but it also sounded a bit rehearsed to me. As if he was just repeating someone else's words. Okay, I state dismissively. Where are the rest of your friends? I don't know, he says, and I take a step closer to the table. Really, I don't know. We have multiple small cells set up around the country and most of our contact is done online or over the phone. We don't meet up unless we're preparing for a mission. I nod slowly, then crouch down so I can face the man eye to eye. Okay, I say as I place my hand on his shoulder. I believe you. His eyes widen in shock. Then he tries to pull away, but I hold him firm. I told you everything I know, he states fearfully. Please don't kill me. I look into the man's eyes and smile reassuringly. Relax, I tell the man calmly. You're not going to die today. The man relaxes somewhat, and his shoulders slump in relief. His breathing slows and his heart rate returns to normal. Oh, thank God, he exclaims quietly as he looks up at me. That's such a relief. Thank you, sir. I wouldn't thank me yet, I say as I stand back up and turn to my guards at the door. We're about done here. Get them both ready to be transported to the facility in Delaware for a full neural debrief, I order. Yes, sir. They reply and move to assist the two captives as they are led off the operating table and then towards the door. The guy the first was talking to still didn't understand what was happening, but if the rumors I heard about that facility are true, then I'm sure he'll soon find out. After the two captives are carried out, I hear the soft click of the door to the viewing room open as Pierce walks through it. Well, that was interesting, he says once he steps closer to me. I must say, while I find your methods to be somewhat crude, I applaud the dedication you have to your work and the organization. It shows great strength of character. He pauses for a moment to look around at the bloody torture chamber before turning his attention back to me. However, it seems like you might want to reconsider some things. Pierce smiles at me. You see, the problem with this sort of brutality is that the more extreme you are, the easier it is for the captive to misunderstand what you're doing. He tells me with a smile. It's important to remember that sometimes it's better to speak softly than to make a ruckus. This isn't an easy lesson to learn, I know, but you should keep it in mind moving forward. I nod dutifully at his words of advice. Thank you for the advice, Secretary Pierce, I say to him with fake sincerity. Don't mention it, Pierce replies as he laughs lightly. Now, why don't we go somewhere private so we can talk about this little situation we found ourselves in, Pierce says as he starts walking towards the exit, and I follow after him. Washington, D.C., Alexander Pierce's residence. A few hours later, I was sitting across from Pierce in the office of his house. We had been there since early afternoon, and a couple of his aides and security men have joined us as well. As I sit here watching Pierce and listening to him speak, I notice that he looks really tired. Not like he was physically exhausted but mentally drained. Dealing with these cells may be tedious but they should pose no trouble for us, Pierce says as he addresses the room. But Senator Crane is another story. He has deep connections with Congress and a few contacts in the White House. His sudden disappearance would cause a lot of problems. We need to move carefully on this. With Project Insight finally being put into motion, if we start making waves in the government, they might begin looking into our activities. And if they do that, then our operation here will be compromised. He pauses briefly, taking a sip of water from the glass on his desk. First thing first, we need to find out where these friends of humanity are hiding. If there's one thing I've learned from working in politics, it's that having a secret network is useless if you don't have control over it. That goes for the people as well as the bases. He pauses for a moment, looking around at the different faces in the room before his gaze lands on me. Major Rumlow, I'd like you to run point on this. I give Pierce a confused look as I raise my eyebrows at him. I want you to lead a team to infiltrate the Friends of Humanity, gather intelligence on their operations, and report back to me immediately. Once we have what we need, then you'll be free to act upon whatever needs to be done. I nod, understanding exactly what Pierce is asking me to do. Of course, Secretary Pierce. Good, Pierce says as he stands up from his chair and walks around the desk. Now, I suggest you get to work right away. You have a lot of ground to cover and time is of the essence. I nod again and turn toward the door to leave the office. But before I can make it out the doorway, Pierce turns around and addresses me again. Oh, and Major Rumlow. Yes, sir, I ask hesitantly. Keep your men on high alert. There's a good chance they could encounter hostile resistance along the way. I nod at his words and leave his office behind me as I return to my hotel to pack for the coming trip. Houston, Texas. Swamp Lands. Friends of Humanity FOH main compound. Omniscient POV. Moving over trees with black trunks, rotting vegetation, and scummy water, we make our way deeper into the swamp's lands to see a small makeshift camp centered on a dried-out patch of grass. A handful of men wearing worn-out army gear stand guard by the entrance, their weapons at the ready. A large tent sits in the middle of the camp. Inside is a small wooden table with a map spread out on it. On top of the table is a small high-tech holo display that displays the image of the swamp area surrounding us. A tall lean man with blonde hair and light blue eyes was seated at the table and stared at the map with intense interest. Beside him sat a pale-skinned man with long brown hair and blue eyes that were firmly set into a stern expression. He was wearing black tactical gear similar to that of his partner. That freak may be an abomination to our species, but he sure makes some useful tech, the blonde-haired man says as he looks at his partner. What do you think, Graydon? The other man gives the blonde man a sidelong glance before answering. I think you shoulda killed it when you found it, Paul. He says before letting out a sigh, but I guess it's worth keeping it alive if it can help us reach our goals. Paul says as he glances up at his partner. But we got lucky with this one. He's actually pretty smart for a freak. Graydon nods at the comment before turning his attention back to the map. How long until the first batch of weapons is done? He asks. About a week, maybe 2, Paul replies. Depends on how hard it is to steal the materials we need. That won't be a problem. Crane has already given the order for his contacts to deliver what we need. Graydon replies. All we need now is to plan our next move. Paul gives his partner a thoughtful look. What should we do about the team that failed? He asks. We can't have them talking to the authorities. I trained those guys myself, they'll never talk, Graydon says dismissively. Besides, they don't know anything that could bring us down. True enough, Paul admits. But we shouldn't take any chances. Let's have our contacts in the police department look out for them just in case. Graydon thinks it over for a moment. Fine, he says reluctantly. Just make sure you tell them that if they see them, make it quick. Those men are still soldiers for humanity. Of course, Paul replies. With that said, Paul gets up from his chair and starts heading toward the entrance. I'm going to check in on the weapons manufacturing. I'll see you later. He leaves the tent and heads towards the holding cells of the FOH base. 2012, Houston, Texas. Friends of Humanity FOH compound. 1 week later, Omniscient POV, Graydon Creed, field commander for the FOH, was standing on the firing range beside the main entrance to the compound, overlooking the new batch of recruits practicing with live ammunition. He watched as the group of armed men practiced with their rifles, shooting at targets placed on the ground around them. Take your shots, he shouts as the squad takes aim, and each man fires a shot at the target. The sound of gunfire echoes throughout the compound as the bullets hit their mark and send pieces of paper flying out of the center of the targets. Not bad, Graydon says as he watches the men reload their weapons. But there's still some room for improvement. Keep practicing. The men nod and continue to fire their weapons at the target as Paul Stacy, Strategic Operations Commander for the FOH, approaches him from the side. The new recruits are looking good. Yeah, Graydon replies as he nods. Not really much I can teach, the scouter said a few of them came from military backgrounds. Good, Paul replies with a smile. Any favorites? All of them are good men for answering the call to defend their race from extinction, Graydon replies. But if I had to pick. Graydon's eyes move to the end of the firing line and Paul follows his gaze toward one of the recruits. He was a tall young man with mid-length dark black hair that was shaved on the sides and fair skin. Dressed in black tactical gear similar to the others who stand beside him, nothing really stood out about him but for the bizarre-looking black tribal tattoos running down both his toned arms. The kid with the tattoos? Paul asks and gives his partner a curious look. Yep, Graydon says thoughtfully. His name's Mark Grunwald. He's been outpacing all the rest of them since day one. Interesting. Paul agrees as he continues to watch the recruit practice. Anyway, I gotta head back to HQ, expecting a call from Senator Crane to finalize the details of the attack. Good luck, Graydon says as he returns his attention back to the recruits. Alright, that's enough for today. Hit the mess hall and grab something to eat. Then meet me back here for more training. The recruits disperse from the firing range and start heading towards the mess hall while the ones who aren't part of the drill team go back to their barracks or tents. As they walk past him, Graydon notices the tall tattooed boy staring at him intently. "Hey," Graydon calls out to him as he catches his eye. "You alright?" Mark doesn't answer him. Instead, he stares at Graydon with cold hazel eyes and opens his mouth slightly as he mouths something under his breath. Boom! Asterisk. Before he can say anything, several loud explosions and gunshots ring through the air followed by the sounds of screaming. All at once, the entire camp erupts into chaos as several gunshots ring out in rapid succession. Men scream and shout as they run around frantically, searching for the source of the commotion. "What happened?" one of the guards cries as he runs past Graydon, pointing toward the direction of the noise. "Shots incoming. We're under attack." Men panic as they rush towards the gates as fast as they can, only to discover that they've been blown apart by explosives. Boom! Asterisk. Graydon watches as another explosion engulfs the building closest to him, sending debris raining down onto the compound grounds below. Several more explosions follow suit and the compound begins to shake violently. As Graydon tries to make sense of the situation, a loud bang resounds nearby. Looking over his shoulder, he spots an enemy sprinting towards him, carrying a heavy machine gun slung across his chest. Before he can react, however, a bullet slams into his leg from behind and sends him sprawling forward onto his knees. He quickly rolls to the side, but the feeling of a cold barrel against his neck halts him from moving further. "Stop!" a cold voice barks from behind him. Graydon slowly turns around, only to see Mark standing above him with a rifle pointed directly at his head. Panic fills him as he looks around for help, but only the dead bodies of the other new recruits lay around them, while the rest of the FOH forces try to fend off the soldiers attacking their base. "Who are you?" Graydon asks gruffly. Mark keeps his finger on the trigger as he looks down at Graydon indifferently. "Just a guy doing his job," he whispers as he lowers his weapon slightly and, without warning, pulls the trigger, causing a spray of bullets to rain down on Graydon's body. The rounds pierce his torso, leaving deep holes in his flesh. Graydon collapses onto the ground in a pool of his own blood. His vision blurs and fades away as he falls unconscious. Crash! Asterisk. An explosion rocks the compound as walls collapse into piles of rubble. Screams fill the air as men scramble to escape the collapsing structures. Some manage to get clear before the wall caves in completely, crushing dozens beneath its weight. Others weren't so fortunate. "Get back to cover," someone shouts from somewhere near the entrance to the compound as a barrage of bullets riddles the outside perimeter. Gunfire rings out again and this time hits home, causing the person speaking to fall backward into the mud. Several minutes pass as the battle rages on, the sound of gunfire filling the air with every passing second. Boom boom! Asterisk. Another series of explosions rock the compound, knocking people off their feet and sending dust rising from the earth. Another wave of screams echoes throughout the compound as yet another structure crumbles to the ground. More than half of the buildings in the compound have collapsed into ruins by now, while many others remain intact but damaged. Smoke rises from several places within the compound where fires have broken out due to explosions and gunfire. "What's going on?" Paul yells as he rushes towards a specific building. "Where's Graydon?" "Sir, they're coming." Paul whirls around to face his subordinate, surprised to hear that. "Where?" "There. Over there." A guard points toward the direction of the entrance. 3 men, armed with assault rifles. Paul immediately tries to sprint harder and orders the guards stationed with him to hold position outside as he moves towards the inside of the building. The inside looked to be an armory as rows upon rows of shelves lined up along the walls, filled with various types of guns and ammo. But Paul ignored the sight as he frantically rushed towards a large metal crate that sat in the corner of the room. A few seconds later, 3 figures appear outside at the entrance of the building. All of them wearing solid black combat armor with a silver shield logo emblazoned on their shoulders. Each man carries a modified FNF 2000 rifle in their hands and each also has a grenade launcher strapped to their back. They begin advancing upon the FOH troops guarding the gate, preparing themselves for an ambush. Suddenly, one of the soldiers guarding the entrance drops to his knees as a stream of bullets tears through his upper body, killing him instantly. "Out of my way," Paul yells as he bursts through the walls of the building, clad in a thin silver-plated full-body exosuit that faintly pulsed with purple energy and brandishing a large high-tech-looking rifle. "The fuck are you supposed to be?" One of the enemy soldiers laughs as he raises his rifle. Some knockoff Iron Man. We'll blow you away like, poof. An intense blast of purple lightning strikes him square in the chest. His body disintegrates into ash mere moments after being struck and disappears entirely from view. Major, we got a problem, one of the remaining soldiers cries out over the comlink as they raise their weapons and fire. Tink tink tink, asterisk. The bullets smash harmlessly against Paul's exosuit as he fires another bolt of lightning at the two soldiers left standing before him, blowing them away just as easily as the first. Regroup on me, Paul commands over the radio to the remaining FOH soldiers as he scans the surrounding area for any sign of movement. We'll kill them all, don't let any escape. Houston, Texas, Friends of Humanity FOH compound. Brock POV, that suit kind of sucks, I muttered as I stood atop one of the destroyed walls overlooking the compound, watching as the small team that I brought with me continued fighting for their lives. Ha 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 ha. Paul crackled madly as he rampaged throughout the compound and, while he was in the exosuit, it didn't take long for most of my men to die, either getting shot by lightning or crushed by falling debris when the buildings fell down on top of them. Only a handful survived the carnage. I mean, it makes him a little bit stronger and faster, but not by much, I murmured as I watched my soldiers being slaughtered one by one. He's still way more powerful than normal humans should be able to handle. I guess I should probably help. Bang, bang, asterisk. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of distant gunfire and the cries of panic from inside a building off to the side of the compound. Focusing my sight, I could make out several men running out of the building, firing guns and throwing grenades behind them. As the panicked group ran to Paul, I concentrated my enhanced hearing on them. Help, the freak got out, one of the men yelled as he flees to Paul's side. You idiots, Paul screams angrily, the last thing we need right now is a pissed off mutant. Crash, asterisk. As if to enunciate his words, a section of the wall of the building explodes outward, sending chunks of concrete flying everywhere. My gaze shifts over toward the building as a small figure emerges from the rubble and dust. Watch out, it's coming, a man warns the others as he ducks behind Paul. Get away from it. The figure strides confidently out of the building and onto the compound grounds. Huh, I exclaim in shock and stare at the figure in disbelief as a small silver teddy bear with glowing purple eyes emerges onto the battlefield. Kill it, Paul growls as he raises his gun and fires a burst of purple bolts at the newcomer. 2012, Houston, Texas, Friends of Humanity FOH main compound. Paul Stacy POV. Fuck, I snarl as the purple lightning bolts of energy strike against the metallic shell of the silver teddy bear and do absolutely nothing to harm it. This shit is useless, I growl as I retreat back into the small group of soldiers I had left with me. Why are you idiots just watching it? Fire. Several of the soldiers open fire on the mysterious teddy bear, only to have their bullets bounce off its thin metallic skin and do no damage whatsoever. The small teddy bear just ignores the incoming's fire and begins to shuffle forward in its stubby legs through the stream of bullets over towards us, its eyes surging with purple energy and a vacant look on its innocent face. It's a fucking teddy bear, for God's sake. Just kill it already, one of the soldiers cries out to the others as they continue firing blindly at the miniature toy. The teddy bear continues walking toward the group of soldiers, who begin panicking and shouting in protest as they try to flee from the danger. Zap, asterisk. A beam of purple lightning shoots out from the teddy bear's eyes, striking one of the fleeing soldiers in the thigh and sending her stumbling forwards. Shit, help me, please, she screams as she clutches her injured leg. Don't kill me, zap, asterisk. The teddy bear doesn't even acknowledge the soldier's words as another beam fires out and a second soldier falls to the ground next to her, having been shot in the chest. Run, a man shouts as he runs past the fallen soldiers. Get to the gates. The soldiers quickly gather together and begin retreating to the nearby compound gates, abandoning their posts and rushing out of the compound in fear. Fuck, I curse as I watched everything that I helped build come crashing down around me and aim my rifle toward the prison building that teddy bear came from. I know this thing is just one of your little toys. Come out now, or all. Zap, asterisk. The teddy bear emits another stream of purple electricity from its eyes and the next thing I know, I'm lifted off my feet and thrown back into the air. I soar through the air and crash into the ground hard enough to send me flying again. God damn it, I growl as I stumble to my feet and regain my balance, my heart pounding from the impact. Zap, asterisk. Another beam of purple lightning shoots out from the teddy bear as more unlucky soldiers fall to the ground. We're getting out of here. I shout over the radio to my men. Roger that, sir. One of the soldiers replies. Go, I order as I move to join them. That thing is getting closer to us with each passing moment. Hurry up, boom, asterisk. Another section of the wall of the compound collapses inward, sending tons of concrete and steel flying through the air. What the hell? One of my soldiers tries to cry out as a muscular tattooed arm breaks through the wall and grabs him by the throat. Before he can say anything, the grip tightens around his neck and then he's pulled through the hole in the wall. Erga, a short muffled scream sounded out from the other side of the wall, followed by a wet thud. What the foo? I begin to say but am cut off by the sight of a familiar figure emerging from the opening in the wall. Isn't that the new recruit Graydon pointed out? I wonder as I watch the man emerge from the hole in the wall. Where do you think you're going? He asks with a stern voice as he looks down at me with cold, piercing hazel eyes. Hey, aren't you one of us? I call out desperately to the man. What do you think you're doing? The man ignores me as he suddenly launches himself at our small group of soldiers with inhuman speed and kicks one of the soldiers in the side of the stomach so hard that his entire body was sent flying back before splattering as a wet stain against a wall. The man turns his attention toward another soldier and snatches him by the neck, before crushing his windpipe with his bare hand. The man then leaps towards another soldier and punches him in the gut, the force of the blow making his arm pierce through the soft flesh. The soldier screamed in agony before clutching his stomach, unable to breathe. The man then grabbed his head and threw him back into the remaining crowd of panicked soldiers. What the hell is going on? I shout as I realize we stood no chance in front of this man, he seemed unstoppable. After the man made quick work of the small group of soldiers, he turned his attention toward me and I immediately raise my rifle and point it at him as I take a step back. Now that that's taken care of, I've been meaning to ask. What's with the teddy bear? He asks calmly as he ignores the weapon aimed at him and strides forward toward me confidently. Saints, stay back, I reply nervously as I pull the trigger of my rifle. A bolt of purple lightning fires from the gun and arcs through the air, hitting him square in the chest. The bolt easily tears through the thin fabric of his black shirt but halts as it slams into his skin. The man doesn't flinch or even grimace from the attack, instead, he just stares at me with indifference as he continued to approach. I'm only going to ask you nicely one more time, he says simply as he nears me. What's the deal with the teddy bear? I slowly lower my rifle as the futility of the situation dawns upon me. Even if I managed to shoot him, it wouldn't hurt him. I don't have any close-range weapons that could do any real damage to him either. In fact, I don't have anything at all. I stutter in confusion, unsure of what to do. The man stares at me for a moment with an unreadable look, before his gaze shifts to the side and he takes one step back away from me. Zap, asterisk. Suddenly, a large purple beam of lightning shoots out from behind me, striking me directly in the chest and knocking me to the ground. Houston, Texas. Friends of Humanity FOH main compound. Brock POV. Era. Paul cries out in pain as the purple beam of lightning hit him square in his back, knocking him to the ground as the force of the blow tears away at the thin metal of his exosuit. Zap, asterisk. Another blast of purple electricity flies out from the teddy bear, frying his gloved hands as he tried to hold them out defensively to shield himself. Zap, asterisk. Another pair of purple beams shoot out from the teddy bear's eyes, causing him to recoil away. The last vestiges of his suit are eviscerated. Zap, asterisk. The teddy bear begins shooting out another barrage of purple bolts from its eyes, demolishing the suit and causing Paul's flesh to blacken as the beams burn through his skin. Zap, asterisk. Zap, asterisk. Zap, asterisk. Zap, asterisk. Zap, asterisk. The metallic teddy bear continuously fires off more purple beams from its eyes as Paul's body writhes in the dirt, unable to do anything to stop it. Pieces of the exosuit melted into his skin, as the nauseatingly sweet smell of rapidly burning flesh fills the air. The bear continues firing away until it finally comes to a stop as it realizes that Paul has already been reduced to a pile of blackened bones. The compound goes silent as I stare down at the charred heap, before glancing over at the teddy bear as it stands motionless in the distance. Its glowing purple eyes stared at me with a blank expression. My head tilts to the side as I stare down at the metal toy with interest. Is there someone inside this thing? Or is it just some kind of robot? They did call it a mutant, so maybe. My thoughts are suddenly interrupted as the sound of shuffling footsteps reaches my heightened ears and look over to see someone approaching from the other side of the compound. It was a small Asian boy, who looked to be about 14 or 15 years old. He was wearing a dirty plain white t-shirt and blue jeans. His hair was cropped short, and his eyes were a light shade of purple. As the boy neared from behind the teddy bear's position, he stared at me with cold indifference. "Are you one of them?" he asks calmly as he approached me. I stare over at the boy curiously, wondering where he had come from. "Who are you?" I ask the boy warily. He stares up at me with a blank expression for a few moments before turning his attention back toward the teddy bear and placing his small hand atop its head. The teddy bear doesn't even turn towards the boy as he touches it. Instead, it continued focusing its gaze on me. "We're not going back in that cage," he mutters softly as he removes his hand from the teddy bear's head. The teddy bear remains motionless, its lifeless eyes staring straight ahead. "If you're going to try and kill me, go ahead," he says quietly as he glances over at me. "But I want you to know that I won't let you do it without a fight." Silence falls within the decimated compound as I just stare over at the boy with a quizzical look, before an amused smirk overtook my face. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.